into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. People into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. To the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer.
Examples of some of the challenges we face immediately. For instance, a planned shutdown of the West African gas pipeline was supposed to take place in October last year. At the intervention of this government, it was postponed till January. This is a long delayed maintenance and has to be urgently done. But what it means is that there will be no gas available for all our generating plants in the east of Ghana, that is the Tema Enclave, because it will have curtailed the gas coming from Nigeria and the gas that comes in the reverse flow from our gas processing plants in the west. And so it means that the thermal generating plants in the Tema Enclave would have no access to gas. And normally, to forestall blackouts because of the loss of almost 2,000 megawatts of power we have to make provision for fuel. And this is light crude oil, heavy fuel oil, and distillate fuel. Unfortunately, enough provision was not made for this eventuality. When the fuel arrives, it takes time to import it, 3 weeks to place an order and get it delivered. And when it arrives, you have to treat the fuel for another week and a half to make it ready for use in the generating plants. And so there's a threat of power outages. But my brothers and sisters, don't despair. Like I said, you elected us to solve the problems, not to put the blame on anybody else or to shoulder you with those problems. They are called a meeting of all the stakeholders in the electricity value chain. And they have been sitting since yesterday to today to come out with innovative solutions so that we're able to keep the lights on. And so I can assure you, with some of the ideas they've come up with, we would make sure that your lights stay on and that we do not have doomsday, as you popularly call it. On the vexed issue of the National Cathedral, the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice directed government to audit the project and investigate any misuse of public funds. Government is enjoined to follow this directive and will soon activate such an investigation into the project. But on the future of the project, the Cathedral, I believe that all of us as Christians must forge a consensus on how to achieve such a project without recourse to public funds. And this project must be achieved at a reasonable cost. In the current circumstances that Ghana is going through, it makes no sense to achieve such a project at a whopping sum of $400 million. I am informed that the National Ecumenical Center in Abuja, which is used by all Christian faith in Nigeria, was built at a cost of $30 million. I believe that we can reach a more reasonable figure for achieving such a project, and together we can raise the funding for it. Such a reconsideration of this project might even include changing the current site that was chosen for the project. I leave the rest to any such future consultation that we will have as the body of Christ. an inventory of all uncompleted health facilities and prepare a plan and program to complete and operationalize these. To improve access to health care for all our people, we will in the next budget uncap the National Health Insurance Levy. This is important so that the National Health Insurance Authority can have sufficient funds to reimburse health service providers for the care that they provide to the public.
Yes, we have obviously announced that we are going to scrap certain taxes. We'll stick to just that. But it doesn't also mean that we don't care about the revenue. We care about the revenue. And we will have to do more on revenue. But it doesn't necessarily mean we should increase taxes. Some of the taxes out there are not bringing in the revenue that it should. For example, the betting tax is bringing in less than 50 million Ghana cedis a year. It's a nuisance tax. Scrapping 50 million Ghana cedis will not mean anything in a way that will affect the economy if you are to adjust, particularly from the expenditure side. I mean, the noise with the betting tax and all does not comprehend the imposition of such a tax. My position on the e-levy is well known. I do not intend to run from it. I've written articles against the e-levy. I championed opposition against the e-levy. I still stand by them. The Chairman, the e-levy is neither a direct tax, indirect tax, or an excise tax. I don't know how to classify the e-levy as a tax practitioner. The Chairman, it doesn't mean that I do not recognize that the e-levy brings in certain revenue. But the fact remains that the e-levy retards our progress towards a cash-light economy and the fintech. We need to abolish the e-levy. I've said, and I'm on record to have said, that given the opportunity to abolish the e-levy, I want to restate that position, that if approved as part of the first budget, I'll be privileged and I will announce that we will abolish the e-levy as part of our first budget. Mr. Chairman, Ghana currently collects approximately 13.8% of GDP in terms of tax revenue, according to the latest data I've cited as part of the transition. It is obvious that we can do better. I've studied the Ghana economy for some time, and I can say without mentioning a word that Ghana has huge potential when it comes to tax revenue mobilization. You don't necessarily have to increase taxes before you rake in revenue. We have the handles. What we need to do is to improve compliance. I will work with the JRA, the Tax Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that we increase compliance and to raise the revenue as much as we can. In the medium term, it is my vision, when approved, to increase the revenue from 13.8, tax revenue from 13.8% of GDP to about 16 to 18%.
There should be private sector participation. What we intend to do is to form a 7-member committee, chaired by technical experts, legal experts, financial experts, and some industry players, and even somebody from the consumer side. What we want them to do is to get us a framework, looking at best practices. Would the concession approach work, or a full privatization work? We will stay off as politicians, let them get the framework in a more transparent, open, frank manner. Then when we get the buy-in of Ghanaians, then we can set the standards using an RFQ, an RFP, and then a competitive tender process. Let me make this clear. We are not going to do sole sourcing when it comes to the ECG private sector participation. Competitive tender process with some element of private sector participation using local content. And then we set the KPIs So we make progress. And so we are clear in our minds what we intend to do. The main problem with ECG is not just the collection, but even how they spend or administer what they collect. They collect on average about 1.3 billion cedis every month. Only 850 million or 900 million goes into the cash waterfall mechanism. So what it means is that almost 400 million does not find its way into the cash waterfall mechanism because they've signed all kinds of contracts. Yesterday at the meeting, it came to light that they have 2,000.
The more important thing.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer.
Good morning to you, and this is Pan-African Television, and we're bringing you live the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. Here we say it as it is, no matter who is involved in the end, we'll leave you better educated. I am SENA NOMBO. Now, this morning, we're having a discussion on the Electricity Company of Ghana. In fact, there's even an audit report that is out on the ECG, the last 3 quarters of 2024. But the main discussion is around what to do with the Electricity Company of Ghana. Because President Mahama, the nominee for Energy Ministry, have all hinted at possibility of privatization of some form. So we'll talk about the energy crisis and the moves to privatize the Electricity Company of Ghana. And then we'll move on to the first week of the John Dramani Mahama administration. The appointments that have been made. So far, 25 ministerial appointments. Chronicle says 25, 35 more to go because the promise is 60. And then the other appointments, CEO positions, we have a national security coordinator, national security advisor, and then, of course, we have other appointments that have been made. We'll be going through the appointments, then we'll be talking about the National Cathedral. What happens to the National Cathedral? Then there's a school feeding, challenges to the school feeding program that they have already, first week. One of the things they had to deal with is finding food for students in senior high schools. And then Operation Recover or Loot. The NPP organized a whole press conference where they were talking about the fact that the oral is illegal. They pushed it at the appointments committee level and then took it to a press conference. It becomes a topic of discussion. And then the promise to withdraw e-levy and other taxes. So we'll talk about that first week within the context of these issues. Thank you for joining us this morning once again and joining me in the studio for the discussions today. Comrade Kwesi Prajina is General Secretary of Socialist Movement of Ghana. We're also joined by Solomon Owusu, who is a member of the Movement for Change. Gabriela Tete is Central Regional Communications Officer of the National Democratic Congress. I haven't seen her in a while. Good morning.
Good morning, and a happy new year.
Many, many happy returns.
New year to all my co-panelists. It's been ages since I saw them, and not to talk of even appear on the platform with them. As for the whole of last year, I couldn't make it to this show because it was a very important time for us, especially in the central region. So I wasn't able to honor many of the invitations to show up on the show. So I apologize for that. But this year, I've made amends, so whenever you call me.
No, you've started.
Yes.
This is just a beginning. To make amends, you need to do more. But nice to have you on the set.
But
and also, we are expecting Alhaji Alhaji to join us to complete the panel, former Member of Parliament for Tamale Central. That's our panel for today. So let's start from the Electricity Company of Ghana. And I'll start with, I think, a comment I got towards the end of our show last week because the ECG matter had come up. This is Dr. David Percy. Read the matter of privatization of ECG. This was the very heart of Ghana's compact with the U.S. Millennium Challenge Corporation. I am on all fours with Comrade Kwesi Pratt in opposition to the very idea. ECG is a monopoly. A private monopoly is always injurious to the public interest anytime, anywhere. And privatizing a public monopoly is doubly injurious and criminal. And I'm sure you've heard something. We'll get there. But first, let's start the discussion with the Electricity Company of Ghana and also the energy crisis and the indication that there will be some privatization of some form being considered for the Electricity Company of Ghana. And I'll start from my left with Gabriela.
Thank you, SENA. Since you read Dr. Percy's text message, let me start on a sad note with the sad passing of Dr. Percy this morning. It's been terrible news. I met him on this show, to be very honest with you. And I found out that he was my neighbor. So sometimes after the show, Uncle Kwesi will request that I drive him back home to his apartment. And in those after-show conversations, as we drove along, sometimes you could see the wisdom and the knowledge that the man had in that small frame. You know, this country has really lost a true patriot, a true nationalist, somebody who has my deepest and uttermost respect. And I wish his family the deepest condolences. Deepest condolences. It's very sad news. But privatization of ECG, it's long overdue for many of us. But the question is, what kind of privatization? Because, I mean, let's face reality. ECG indeed is a monopoly. ECG is full of so many inefficiencies. Now, privatization does bring efficiency into an organization. It will bring a new injection of capital, new ways of doing things, new technology, even new management. At the Veteran, I was listening to Honorable John Jinapo even make a proposal that perhaps these big fund holders like SNET, like NAT, should consider investing monies into SNET as some equity, and then they hold the private ownership part or the non-governmental ownership part of the state electricity distribution company. That could work, but I think that we as a country should stretch our options on what privatization ought to be, and not just about having mutual fund holders or investors holders or big holders come in and just to take up equity. It needs to be more than just people putting in funds to claim ownership and try to reduce government's interest in the project. I think that when you study how the European electricity distribution system is run, it's very privatized. People or companies buy from the bulk producers, what we call here as IPPs. Buy from the bulk producers. They are given enclaves that they supply to, and then they go back and then collect the monies and stuff. But in the specific case of Ghana, we are having from upstream being the power producers, from to transmission to ECG, and ECG as a single entity is supposed to be the holder, collector, distributor of all revenues that is supposed to be plowed back to all the services that are at the upper levels. Because of ECG's inefficiencies, everybody up there is suffering, and including Ghana herself, because now there's a $2.5 billion debt owed IPPs that ECG could not recover. We have a country where we are unable to manage our currency, and we are buying power in cents per kilowatt hour. So any mismanagement on the monetary side in terms of our currencies management now goes to affect how much we are paying for power. ECG is collecting in cities. ECG again, on the issue of billing and collection, they are terrible in bill collections. You know, when Baumia started his digitization drive in ECG and introduced Haptel, and they told us that now ECG has gone cashless, so that is supposed to improve the cash flow of ECG. We are told that ECG at a point is able to accruing almost like 800 million in a month, but yet still that money doesn't find its way either to the cash waterfall mechanism. It doesn't find its way back to the power producers. The transmission companies don't also get their money's worth, and so there's just so much that is sitting in that company called Electricity Company of Ghana that needs to be resolved. Beyond management, beyond technology, beyond billing, ownership, there's a deep conversation and a deep surgery that ought to happen to ECG. And I think that it's good that in the early weeks of His Excellency's administration, he met with the IPPs and we're having a conversation about ECG. If our 24-hour economic policy is going to materialize, it borders a lot on power generation, cost of power, and how much services the company is able to give to the people, and especially the enclaves that are going to be producing within the 24-hour economic 24-hour policy framework. So it's very important that His Excellency is having these conversations with all these people, and we're having to have this conversation about ECG. And the sooner we find a solution to ECG, the better. I'm also aware that His Excellency, during the campaign period, when he went to the US and he met with the Americans, he had a conversation about the possibility of reintroducing Compact 3, which you read from Dr. Pierce's text, the Millennium Challenge Compact, that was supposed to help us to address this issue. The NPP came in 8 years. We know what happened with the PDS, because even something as simple as privatizing this thing, they had to put in corruption and all kinds of stuff, so it couldn't materialize. Now 8-9 years down the line, we are still having to have a conversation around how to improve ECG, and it's a very important conversation moving forward. As I said, our 24-hour economic policy is dependent on power, heavily dependent on power. Ghanaians have had a history where we've had erratic power supplies because of climatic conditions, and so we have to bring in thermal to keep improve power generation and to keep the lights on. And now we are also now having to listening to the power generators, and they mentioned that in actual fact now we also have to think about even increasing the power generation sets, because what we have now, when they do the projection, we'll need about another 2,000, 3,000 extra megawatts of power generation to keep up with our population. And you know, in the same energy sector, we are flaring gas in Jubilee, right? That gas that is going up as waste, because when they are drilling the oil, they have to inject water at the base of the oil to push the oil up. The gas up there is what would have captured, transported through pipes to Ghana Gas to produce the energy for the thermal plants. But now we're having to flare because we don't have enough infrastructure to offtake the gas from the Jubilee fields. So also important is that His Excellency, now that he's in office, will also think about how to expand on the Ghana Gas infrastructure to be able to generate more from the oil fields, pass through the pipes, and then as we increase our generation set, we have the gas in there to also support it and also to export to other countries. I'm happy that the West Africa pipeline maintenance that was scheduled for this week or last week had also been postponed, because that would have also taken this country by surprise. I remember when His Excellency was sworn in and some of my friends had their lights out. Then they will send me a text message, Gabriela, you people promised us that there's no doom show. And I was like, you be patient. This is not doom show. And I was just saying to myself, I pray to God we have a solution within the next 24 hours, because if this thing is not solved, Ghanaians, and especially the LPP, is going to take us to the cleaners that just a week into office and we can't keep the light on. So I'm very happy that that issue was resolved, that the IPPs met with His Excellency, and then they've come to some form of gentleman's agreement on how the payments, other conversations that they'll have on how to have the payments issues addressed. And then, but the elephant in the room, ECG, we need to have a very deep conversation. What form of privatization options are there, and what is best suited for this country? I personally don't think that it's as easy as just putting equity holders into ECG and think that that is going to solve our problem. I think that beyond just equity and management, we should have a case where the sector is so privatized that you could have more than one company offering electricity distribution, okay, and then other players can come on board. They buy the power from the IPPs. Some Gridco owns the infrastructure that they operate on. They're able to take enclaves, build them, collect the monies, pay back to Gridco what is owed Gridco, pay back to the IPP or the generation plant that supply the energy, and then we move forward as a country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you just join us, the matter of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. And on Dr. Percy's passing, I don't have any further information yet. Yes, we have been told he's passed on. That is the information we have. As and when we have further information, we'll share with you. Solomon Owusu.
Good morning, SENA, and good morning to Alhaji. It's been a long time.
Yes.
Congratulations for winning.
Thank you. Thank you.
And congratulations to my sister too for a good job done. Yeah. We remain in opposition, and you remember all the bashes we gave to the MPP. I hope and pray that you do something different.
But I saw your jubilation when NDC won.
I didn't jubilate because of NDC. I was dancing my own dance.
but I didn't talk about the dancing. I just said jubilation. So how do you know it was about the dancing? I didn't see the dancing. You didn't see the dancing. So you can dance.
You are a propagandist. And let me greet Senior Comrade Pratt this morning. The news you just broke is not a good one. It's not a pleasant one, especially when I spoke with them only last week. He sent me a text message. I was on TV3. We were discussing an issue, and he came with a different angle. He sent me that message right there. It put me on the toes. I needed to, as it were, re-engineer my thought. And like Gabriela was saying, sometimes I also drive to his place with him, and then we have a lengthy conversation, full of wisdom. So for me to come this morning, I wish you would place his picture on the screen, so that because people know him, but they might have probably forgotten about the person that we are discussing. It's the terrible news. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Energy. You see, Electricity Company of Ghana, whether or not we have to privatize it, I believe that the people of this country voted for the NDC based on the manifesto that they sold to Ghanaians. So at this stage, it means that Ghanaians agree with the party in total on what they sold to it. I don't know. I have not read it, but I believe during the campaign period, the party gave an indication that they would privatize Electricity Company of Ghana. And it also falls in line with some aspect. From the movement of change perspective, we were thinking of outsourcing some aspect of their operations. For instance, the billing, the metering, and then what do you call it? Those critical areas that generates the revenue. But we have realized that there's so much corruption in that sector that if you are looking at the power chain and where the money is supposed to come to finance this distribution activity is having problems, then you have no power sector. So if they want to go on that tangent and believe that it will help the cause of this country, I am for it. But you see, electricity is a national security issue. And many a times I've heard people say that privatizing means compromising on your national security. But now you would agree with me that even in terms of generation, it is not only the VRE that generates power for this country. We have independent power producers. What it means is that right from the generation point of view, private sector has been introduced into it. So if you have a private sector that has been introduced into the generation mix, distribution is with Greco, or transmission is with Greco, and distribution with ECG, and you are introducing a private sector there, I don't think it is too much of a problem. The main issue is the corruption that has bedeviled that sector. Any procurement activity that takes place at the Electricity Company of Ghana is inflated by 150%. I've said it here before. It's a standard operation there. So if you have an institution where a chunk of the money being collected is just given to cronies by way of contracts, inflated contracts, then it is a problem. Again, the audit that you referred to, the audit report by the Pricewater, well, sometimes audit they say they are finding, that's their findings. Yeah. I am waiting to hear the responses that were given by the management of the Electricity Company of Ghana, because sometimes the auditor may make certain observations but then would have ignored the responses that came in, because if it is anything to go by, then this country has really been shortchanged. And if you don't tackle the Electricity Company of Ghana or the power sector very well, I dare say that all the policy interventions that this administration wants to implement will be very, very difficult. You are talking about 24-hour economy. You will need electricity to do that. You are talking about industrialization. It's all about electricity. You are talking about lofty, lofty campaign promises. Without energy, how are you going to implement all these things? So it's very, very crucial. And not just that, you know, that sector, I don't know whether you have gotten their new meter. They have a meter called Nuru. That meter reads like Usain Bolt. And I can tell you it's one of the reasons why the NPP lost the 2024 elections. Because see, rural folks and those in the cities could not believe it, that households that were using only a fan, ceiling fan, at the end of every week were paying more than 200 cedis on electricity. So if you say you are bringing in private sector, is it something that is going to help to deal with the issue of that meter that runs like nobody's business? Now, the aspect of collection, where monies are taken and does not reach the final destination, are these aspects being done by government officials or public sector, for which reason when a private person comes in will help to deal with that matter? If the private sector is coming in to deal with that matter, I have no difficulty. After all, we want efficiency. It's all about efficiency, be it government or private. But many a times, Electricity Company of Ghana has been in the hands of the public, but they still continue to incur losses. There has also been cases where private sector has taken over public assets and there continue to be losses. So it's not a matter of privatization. By bringing the quality private person, if the person that is coming is not quality, then you don't even venture into that sector at all. And you must as well allow the public people to continue to run the system. They have shown over the years, those public guys in there, that they are not ready to change how they behave. And so if a private person is coming in, but you see, the danger with that is that, do we have Ghanaians as private sector persons who have the capacity to fill in these shoes? Or is it the case that the private sector people that are coming here are going to be as usual, the Indians, the Filipinos, the Pakistanis? Now we don't even go in for the Europeans and Americans anymore. Those that take over our space are the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Filipinos, the Lebanese, and to a large extent Nigerians. If you are going to do privatization, make sure you concentrate on Ghanaians. If the Ghanaian is not able to take over, then forget it. Then let it be in the hands of the public sector. Because ceding such a strategic asset to people that are coming from outside is selling our birthright. That will not augur well for this country. That will be sending us back to square one. But in terms of principle of it, from someone with a a background in my background being formerly with the MPP and stuff, I believe in the private sector participation in business, and I will never run away from this. So I will wait and see how it unfolds. They have the mandate to govern, and they have the mandate to govern as well. They should make sure that this privatization will bring an end to all the problems that bedevils that sector. I'll end it here.
Just looking at you, I just remember some of the tussles we have with Dr. David Percy, even when he was on set with you, when he was offset.
Well.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, that the news has really hit me. As a matter of fact, when you said it, I don't feel comfortable continuing with discussions. That is, I have become all of a sudden emotional about the whole thing, because it is playing very much live to me. Only last week, he called and we were discussing it, and the kind of angles he was bringing into the whole discussion, I was asking, okay, I was even going to meet him. When was he going to come to Alhaji Alhaji? So, but now you don't call me. Only to be told this morning. Only to be told this morning. And how would I have that mind, state of mind, stable one, to be able to carry out or carry on with such a discussion?
And one of the things he sent with regard to something you said, 28 May 2022, says, I first heard it on your show, a member of the MPP publicly owning up to the true rules of the MPP in the NLM and the restoration of Asante power in 1954, which then morphed into Matimihu, separatism and open terrorism against Nkrumah, the CPP and our independence. If this meant any significant role in politics for their former vassal enslaved peoples in the soon-to-be new nation Ghana. At the very least, Mr. Solomon, also a member of the MPP National Communication Team, trashes the well-rehearsed lie about the MPP and its origins in the UGCC. That then entirely omits the NLM and its history of violent opposition, terror, and bombings that leads directly to the NLM's prescription, along with other ethnic, regional, and sectarian parties via the Avoidance of Discrimination Act and then Preventive Detection Act in 1958. This falsification of the MPP's history now enables President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to construct the entirely false narrative about Ghana's foundation on the 4th August 1947 by the UGCC and the wholly undeserved place of his forebears, granduncle, uncle, and father as our nation founders. Next, our member of the MPP National Communication Team goes on to campaign openly for Alan Chamantin as their party's next flag bearer. We can be certain on one thing: an almighty battle royale is underway in the MPP for that party's soul. Please watch this space. Dr. David Percy happened, like he said.
I mean, you remember the day that we had a battle on the CPP and the LPP? Oh, this is so sad.
Anyway, let me welcome Alhaji Husseini.
Thank you.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Alhaji is among the many positions he held, a former Deputy Minister for Energy. That's correct. Okay. So we hear Alhaji's views on the matter of the energy crisis and the threat to privatize the ECG.
I think that it's proper for us to pay respect on this platform to Dr. David Percy. Long before Alhaji and Alhaji established his presence on the Ghanaian scene, communication scene, talk show scene, as a feature that occurs every Saturday, Comrade Pratt, Dr. Percy, A.B. Efuseni, our late brother of Nima, Alhaji Bature, were those who brought the discussions to us and gave our discussions better perspective. They were the pioneers, and Dr. Percy was a quintessential discussant on Alhaji and Alhaji, and continued even when he became very sick. When he couldn't appear, he will make sure that his voice is heard on the program through a text message. Or he will send, just like Solomon says, he will send you a private message and say, well, what we are discussing, look at it this way. And even where he always told me, he knows I'm not a member of the NDC, but I believe that if your party does A, B, C, D, they could win souls and hearts of people. And today we've lost him. Great man, great soul. I mean, he clearly was somebody who was willing to share his knowledge. He was not arrogant. Even with that level of understanding of our politics, he could reach out to anybody if you felt that you had something to contribute and he needed to enrich your discussions. On a platform like this, I think it's proper for us to say, may his soul rest in perfect peace. Death will come when it will come, and we cannot run away from it. As we pray for him, we're actually also signifying our own mortality, that one day, on a platform like this, they will be praying for us. So, even though we are not surprised that it has happened, but we feel very sad that it has happened. Now back to ECG. Energy politics has been with us since the creation of the Republic, Ghana. Since the creation of the Republic. It didn't start yesterday. When Dr. Kwame Nkrumah saw the need to provide efficient, low-cost, reliable energy to Ghana, he went to the West and convinced them that we had a natural river course in this country, and that if they developed the river course, they could produce a lot of power for a small country of 6.8 million people. The economy does not look good, because how can 6.8 million people have that much energy? But then the Kaiser group saw opportunity and said, okay, we will help find the money for you to develop the hydroelectric dam. But when we do, we want to establish a smelter here, an aluminium smelter, to consume the energy. Cost-benefit analysis of the people of this country, led by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, look, for the long-term gain of the Republic, let's do it. I have said and always say that Kaiser was here not because they were making a profit by reason of prudent trade or business to transport alumina from Jamaica to the smelter in Ghana and then take it back to Europe. They only did that because they had cheap electricity. In fact, their profit was the subsidy that we gave them. That was their profit. But we needed the power. And you know the politics that characterize that. So that's why I'm saying that energy politics is, I mean, Buzia and his people led a campaign to ensure that the Akosombo Dam was never built, because they felt that we didn't need the Akosombo Dam. So energy politics has been with us for a very long time. The Russians were first to send equipment to Bui. Again, Bui was discovered as a potential energy source during the time of Nkrumah. The Russians were there. Then there was a coup d'etat, NLC, and then there was a declaration that we didn't need the Russians in Ghana any longer. They packed bag and baggage and left Ghana, and we had to stay on the drawing board until 2000 and in the 2000s when Kufuor came and resurrected Bui. He did not find Bui. Bui was already there, and Nkrumah was working very hard to harness the energy resources of this country to ensure that we were self-sufficient. And there's good reason as Deputy Energy Minister, I visited South Korea. At the time that we built the Akosombo hydroelectric dam, Ghana had more energy than South Korea. More energy than South Korea. But today, South Korea has gigawatts, not megawatts, gigawatts of energy. In fact, when we were playing the World Cup in Korea, I was in South Africa, South Korea. When we were playing the World Cup in South Africa, I was in South Korea. And you could see the nexus between economic development and productivity with the ongoing games. Anytime that the people of South Korea was going to play, they had to shut some of the energy down. They had to shut their towers down because people were not going to go to work. And so there would be too much. And so there was a threat to the system. The system could collapse if the system was producing energy, which energy was not going to the factories, the industry, and whatnot. So clearly, energy is very important. Have you ever wondered why we don't have high-rise buildings in Ghana? Because you need energy. Because any high-rise building must have a pump. And the pump will have to send the water to the last floor. Because by natural order of things, water cannot run up the stairs. Somebody must pump it up, but we don't have power. So how do you? The lift. If you build a 120 floor story building, how are you going to go there? You need constant energy. So energy is very important for the socio-economic development of the people. I mean, so many years ago, when I was in secondary school, you know, I used to read with paraffin lanterns. Paraffin. I mean, you buy the kerosene, put it there, and then there's a thread, and that's what you used to read. And you inhale the fumes. Today, people are making it and reading in air-conditioned rooms because of energy. So we need energy. That's why the discussion that we should not toy with our energy in terms of distribution of power is relevant. But one must ask himself, why have we come to this stage? We've come to this stage because of the level of inefficiency in the energy distribution sector, the level of corruption in the energy distribution sector, the level of losses. In fact, the combined losses, when I say technical losses, commercial losses, and collection losses, is about 28%. They're high above industry standards. Industry standard is 7%. You know, when Rawlings was trying to wear up the whole country by sending electricity everywhere, the general refrain of the academicians was that you record losses. When you are transporting power or transmitting power from Accra, Akosombo, to Upper West region or Upper East region, in the process you are going to lose power. That's what we call the technical losses. It's just like when you even go to take a tanker, a fuel tanker, loaded with fuel, and it's transporting it to the north, you will record some losses. These are what we call technical losses. Commercial losses, Dubik has explained it very well. Commercial losses, you buy the power. When you are selling the PPAs, you buy it in cents per kilowatt hour. Cents per kilowatt hour. And your CD is not stable. So your CD is always depreciating. And you bought it 9 cents per kilowatt hour. 9 cents is 9 cents. But 9 cents in 2016 is not, the equivalent of 9 cents in 2016 is not the same as 2025. But the income of Ghanaians have not appreciated that much. So you are still keeping the fuel prices low. So whereas you buy it at 9 cents or more, or 12 cents or 18 cents because you are selling it lower, and so you have to augment. Okay, you have to look for money elsewhere, and make sure that you pay the independent power producers. Then you have the collection losses. Collection losses. I mean, first of all, they don't even send the bills to some places. And even when they send the bills, the money doesn't come. And some people, illegal connections and whatnot. So there's a problem. So when Atamils became president of this country, the government engaged the Millennium Challenge accounts to look at the efficiencies in the energy sector, that is the generation, transmission, and distribution. You know, the parceling up of the energy sector into generation, transmission, and distribution was done by Rollins. There was the energy sector reforms, so that Adam Smith's theory, you can bring about specialization. You have those who are going to generate, and because you have parceled them up into different parts, you can have people come in at the various parts. So you can have independent power producers. And the first independent power production company came into this country when what's his name? Oh, not Qatar. Not Obama. This woman's Clinton. When Clinton came to Ghana, and then the Chicagoans came and established a company, finally sold it to the Dubai people. That was the first independent power production company that we had. Now, when the Millennium Challenge people came and did their assessment, the bottlenecks were actually in the distribution sector. They said, look, for your production, many people are willing to show interest and invest. And the case of the Chicago company was an example. And many others have come in. To be Afede and his people, all of them have come in. And so that sector appears not to be a problem. Distribution, transmission was the best. Greco was always making profit. Greco had no problem. Why? Toll. It says toll. Greco had become a toll institution. When the generation company produced, they just told the power. They just moved the power to the distributors and get their money. Okay. The only thing is that they build a facility that ensures that the distribution company will not get all people hooked onto the power, because if they did, the system will collapse. That is, if the generation was not producing enough power. So the elephant in the room, and I'm using elephant here properly, is the ECG. They lack expertise, they lack resources, and the experience appears to be failing them. I would have said they lack experience, because for a very long time, when Nkrumah established the Volta River Authority, the Volta River Authority grew up to become a symbol of black excellence in power production or generation. Indeed, the footprints of VRA can be seen as far as Sierra Leone and Liberia, a symbol of black excellence. So I wouldn't say experience. Well, they lack experience, but it's failing them. So what do we do? Wholesale privatization is a problem, because wholesale privatization of ECG will only mean that the investor is coming for his money. Then salaries are very low, wages are very low, productivity is very low in this country, but they must get their money, so they will squeeze their money out of us. Many people might have to go without electricity. There are key installations in this country, hospitals and universities, and we have put them on a list of institutions or facilities that must constantly get power. An investor would not care about that. An investor cares about the money. But we need to inject efficiencies. Now, so the thinking is that if you have 28% losses, ECG will continue to operate, but with 28% losses. If you bring in a private investor who can reduce the losses to probably 10%, he will recover 18%. And if you are able to use part of the 18% to pay the private investor, then you are not running. There will be knowledge transfer, technology transfer, and then your institution will guarantee power. That's the thinking. But how that will be done is left for those who are going to draw up, design the areas where a private sector could participate in energy distribution in order not to visit hardship on the people of this country, but reduce the transmission and the commercial losses, technical, commercial, and collection losses to an appreciable level so that we can net off whatever losses we are suffering now with payment to a private sector. That will be fine. But wholesale, because if you bring a private money, council is making also 28%. We go or you come. If the private sector man is making to the 8% losses, what will be the benefit? It will be a useless activity. And this time we will even suffer more because we are losing 28%, and then we have gotten the private sector to invest, and the private sector is charging us more and taking the money away. So it is between the devil and the hard place. But I must hastily add that this attempt at private sector participation is not new. It's not new. Rollins tried it and failed Porto. He brought some French people. He failed.
It's one of the most stupid things anybody can do. Privatization.
Yeah, he failed. So the recent example is PDS. when we did all the things, they said, okay. They said because the Millennium Challenge account people say, oh, because we are looking to see how we can inject resources, expertise, and experience into energy distribution, you need the company that is going to come and participate in the distribution system to have majority shares. The MPP won election 2016 and said, oh, we're giving the company to foreigners, and then they formed their own company, PDS, which had barbers and hairdressers as part of the distance. They also changed. There was a barber. A barber is a hairdresser, except that the barber is the man, the hairdresser is the woman. So and then when we changed it that way, and then we also went to Millennium Challenge account and changed the bank guarantee into an insurance guarantee and paved the way for PDS to take over. We also the result. They collected the money, and it's part of it has now been registered as part of the collection losses because they have not accounted for the money. So clearly, it is between the devil and the deep blue sea. And so this is an ongoing discussion. I'm sure the government will well advise of these two incidents. The first attempt by Rollins to bring in people, French companies, to partake in the distribution, bringing bitters and whatnot, and the recent experience of PDS and what that has led us into. But we need a power sector, a distribution company that works. In fact, there is a company, there's a private a company in the Tema Enclave.
Yes, in the free zones.
In the free zones. It's a private company. It buys the power from the generators, but through Greco, and distributes and collects the revenue and pays government and then its tax. So there's a private company, but exclusively in the free zones board. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just go through a few of the comments you're sharing with us on the topic we're discussing, the matter of the energy crisis and plans to privatize the ECG in some form. First one, this one is good morning, SENA, to you and your panelists. I want the NDC government to agree not to pay monies to previous contractors without going to inspect the projects. The new ministers should not barricade themselves in the air conditions, cars, offices, and security without going to the field. Likewise, the president. And also MPs should be giving government projects to send their constituency. This will let people vote for them always, and NDC will stay longer. That's Dramani who sent that from Salaga. I think he's already started discussing the second issue. This one says, good morning, Senator. For corruption at ECG, I would opt for privatization. Imagine someone owing ECG 500 cedis. During this connection exercise, he offers them 50 cedis, and his light is restored. There are thousands of illegal connections. ECG staff comes to remove the fuse only for the person to go and grease their palms and the light is restored for him. Why wouldn't ECG be in debt? An electricity meter now sells at 4,000 cedis at Nsawam. Why? Said Sender from Ashalaja. Thank you very much for your comment. This one says, been the soul of the student of history, as he called himself, Dr. Percy. I raised an issue at a press conference on GIPA where I stated that the certification of diploma was losing its essence of diploma. At the forum, he was the only one who understood me. Not even the vice chancellor's present, to whom the then A-levels was still higher than diploma. A man with deep thought. I thought I would meet him again alive to discuss a few things with him, but God knows best. Thank you for that comment. And then there's also just one says, good morning, Senator, and your able panel is watching you live from Lagos. Senator, Ghanaians are telling Nana Akufo-Addo and his MPP party that they are wide awake now. No more Jandam. Nana Akufo-Addo and his cabal know they were losing election, so they decided not to put fuel in our reserves at bust, and also refused to pay the IPPs just to sabotage President John Dramani Mahama and NDC government. But God Almighty being so good, Ghanaians are aware of their wickedness and witchcraft. Shame on Nana Akufo-Addo and MPP party. Their plans are back to haunt them. Allah will continue to expose the wicked MPP. That's coming from HTK. Thank you. There's someone who said they can't remember Dr. Percy's face. Do us the honest. The picture was just displayed. Please display the picture again. And this picture has an interesting story behind it, how we took this picture of Dr. David Percy. I didn't take the picture. It was, I think, Era or Latifa, one of them. Well, this one's okay. So you said you can't remember. So that's Dr. David Percy, and famously, a lot of people will always come to me and ask me to ask him, how come he's been student for so long and he's never graduated? Which school is he in? And he used to explain that when it comes to history and politics, it's a lifelong learning experience. You never graduate from learning history and politics. So he's constantly a student watching the space and learning from the space. That's Simon Dokpo alias MP from Baglo Boem, Oti region, says we need a house cleanup exercise and ECG for very good management supply. Says my condolences to Dr. David Percy's family. May he so rest in peace. And Mariama says Ghana cannot move forward if those who still are not punished severely. That's all Mariama says. Mariama, thank you very much for your comment. Well, so those are just some of the comments that I've gone through. But before I bring in comment with the president, I think famously he said something that he said about persons he went to meet on the campus of the University of Ghana, and this was his response at the time. Says, on a day like this, I cannot recollect my position on some academics at UG that my brother Kwesi Pratt refers to. That said, in the matter of JDM leading the NDC in 2024, I have no reason to doubt my brother when he says that the NPP control media has completely misrepresented what the EIU report said. If so, what are we to make of the many who speak for NDC who then proceed from such misrepresentation to mount their defense of their party? Is it laziness or deliberate sabotage or both? He has always held the opinion that the NDC 2013 to 2016 failed when it came to communicating on the Dumso. So actually carried a load that was not for them. He's always held that opinion and always expressed it strongly. Come on, Chris Brad.
Well, first of all of us have been deeply struck by the news of the passing of Dr. David Percy. I met Dr. David Percy probably about 50 years ago. And throughout the period that I've known Dr. David Percy, there's never been a moment when he has shown anger. He continued to maintain his calm throughout even the difficult periods of struggle and so on. And he was such a huge intellectual pillar in the struggles that we waged for the democratization of politics in Ghana and for drawing attention to viable alternatives, to the new liberal order. He always played a leading role in the construction of the socialist movement of Ghana and participated in all of the activities of the socialist movement of Ghana. And we have lost such a cool, calculating, conscientious intellectual. Dr. Percy, although bore the title of a PhD holder, did not believe in academics as a measurement, of one's intellectual ability and so on. And I recall one day when he told me that the first time he realized that some professors can be extremely stupid was his days at the University of Ghana when he came across some professors who couldn't think at all and so on. I think that we've lost a great socialist. He definitely was a socialist, committed one. And at this stage, we can only wish his family, extend our condolences to his family. Indeed, today, we are discussing an issue that Dr. Percy took great interest in. Yes. And like Dr. Percy, I'm implacably opposed to any effort to privatize the electricity company of Ghana. As a matter of fact, I believe firmly that any effort to privatize the electricity company of Ghana is lazy, is senseless, and would not lead to the resolution of the concrete problems that confront us in the energy sector. Now, why do I say this? I say this because of our history. Our history is most important. Okay. Now, I recall that by 1966, the only problem we had with energy was how to extend it to cover all, the regions, all the districts and so on of Ghana. That was the problem we had. Because we were generating sufficient energy, far more than we needed. We were generating power that the whole of West Africa actually could depend on and so on. But we still have plans to increase generation. Indeed, if you refer to the 7-year development plan which the Nkrumah government launched, the Akosombo hydroelectric project was key in that plan. But in addition to that, the Nkrumah government envisaged the construction of the Bui power plant, hydroelectric power plant, and also the construction of mini hydro projects. In addition to promoting green energy, and in addition to generating nuclear power. Okay, so that was the mix in the 7-year development program of Nkrumah. Now, interestingly, after the overthrow of Nkrumah, we decided not to pursue that aggressive program, which was in the 7-year development program. And it's interesting to note that we abandoned that program on the advice of British experts. British experts came here and told us that we're generating more power than we needed and that we didn't have to extend or to expand, our generation capacity. Now, on February 24, 1966, Soviet engineers were already on site to construct the Bui Power Project. We sacked them. We stopped the project. And we only came back to building that project in 2001 or thereafter. Okay. Indeed, if the Achampong government had not built the Pong hydroelectric project, our problems would have started much, much earlier on the advice of British, so-called energy experts and so on. Now, there's something that we need to understand very clearly. If you take our power mix, and I'm happy that Alhaji Husseini is on this panel, if you take the power mix, we are generating hydropower from Akosombo at a cost of between 2 cents to 3 cents per unit. 2 to 3 cents per unit. Now, when you start thermal generation, you generate power at a minimum cost of 11 cents per unit. In fact, the cost can rise up to 33 cents per unit. So clearly, if you're thinking about producing power at affordable cost to the consumer, you don't go for thermal generation. It's very, very expensive. Between 11 cents and 33 cents per unit. One of the problems we're trying to address is the rising cost of electricity to the consumer. And this makes it imperative that we begin to look at the energy mix. Okay. Now, how does privatization resolve this problem? This problem of what energy mix as a country, we should adopt. How does privatization resolve it? It's a matter of policy. It's a matter for government. You understand? The question of what energy mix we should maintain at any particular time is a matter of policy. And it's a matter for government to solve, not private capital. That's number one. Number two, we are operating on the assumption as if privatization is something new, it's a new phenomenon and so on. It is a lie. If you look at the energy sector itself, we started privatization a very long time ago. And the assumption then was that privatization was going to solve the problems that confronted the sector and the people of Ghana. Privatization has rather worsened the plight of the Ghanaian and has worsened our access to electricity. As we speak, you now have independent power producers. That's part of the privatization. Okay? That's clearly part of the privatization. Some time ago, the distribution sector was unified. Then the experts came and told us that, to achieve greater efficiency and so on, you need to break it up. So now you have Gridco, you have Netco, you have ECG, and so on. The problem has not been solved, has it? So what the experts came and told us, we are finding out in practice that it didn't resolve, the problem in any way at all. Now, Alhaji Husseini has told us of previous efforts at privatization which completely failed. Okay. I recall that the Rawlings administration privatized the collection aspect, of the energy sector, the revenue side. And they brought in the electricity company of France. After operating for about 3 years to 5 years, the problems they caused was far bigger than the problems that ECG had. And you have been Deputy Energy Minister before, you know. And privatization of the revenue collection, was a total disaster. It didn't work. Complete disaster. You understand? To the extent that we had to sack the Electricity Company of Ghana because they made a mess. ECG was far better than them. It didn't end there. We're having similar problems also with water. And the government decided to privatize water supply. And they brought in Aquavitans Rand of South Africa. Total disaster. So don't let us talk as if we haven't tried privatization before. We've tried it over and over again, and any time we try, it is a complete disaster. Now, we're not just talking about the power sector and the water sector. That's not what we're talking about. Since 1966, this country has privatized close to 500 state enterprises. Check, close to 500 state enterprises have been privatized, including the Black Star Line, including the State Fishing Corporation, including many divisions of GIHOC and so on. We privatized them. None of them survived except 2. Tell me if I'm lying. All the enterprises we privatized collapsed in our faces. The only 2 surviving enterprises we privatized are Movenpick Ambassador Hotel and Golden Tulip, which is now Lancaster.
Coca-Cola from GIHOC bottling.
No, Coca-Cola was not privatized. It's always been a private company from the very beginning. Always been a private company.
At GIHOC bottling. And may you continue.
Coca-Cola has never been a state company. Okay. But, so this is the experience we have. Privatization leads to collapse. So this false argument that privatization brings greater efficiency and so on, where is the evidence? Everything you have privatized has collapsed under your nose.
That is in Ghana.
Well, I like to confine myself now to Ghana. But if you want us to expand, we can expand.
Yes.
But I'm saying everything you have privatized has collapsed. Okay. Now, this whole talk about private capital being more efficient and so on, what is the motive force of private capital? Maximization of monetary profit, not social profit. Maximization of monetary profit, okay? Not social profit. Now, what does that mean? So, they bring in $10, 10 cedis, and then they take away 20. How does that benefit us? Show me how that benefits us. Now, there's another dimension which is important. I think that issue was raised by Solomon Owusu, and I think that we should not ignore it. Today, if we decide to privatize the Electricity Company of Ghana, who is buying it? Who is buying it? We have already driven ourselves into a situation where the economy is monopolized and completely dominated by hostile foreign interests. You understand? If you take our mobile telephony sector, for example, what is the benefit we are getting from it? And that has been described as a cash cow. Take how much money a company like MTN, for example, is making. How much of it stays in the Ghanaian economy? And then you would decide that, oh, not just, mobile telephony and so on, we are also going to add energy. How foolish can you be? I mean, how foolish can you be? Now, all of these companies which come and buy state enterprises and so on, foreign companies, they have to repatriate their profits. It has dire consequences on the economy. Repatriation of profits has very dire consequences on the economy. As a matter of fact, one of the problems that we are facing with the energy sector is simply the management of our national currency. Okay? If you take the fact that since 1982, today, you check, do the mathematics, the Ghanaian cedi has been devalued by as much as 26,000%. Check. As much as 26,000%, that's how much we have devalued the Ghanaian cedi. Now, if you take the energy sector, especially when we are talking about thermal generation and so on, first of all, the machines we are bringing are imported, dollar denominated. The crude oil and other fuels we are bringing in order to power the plants are also imported. They are dollar denominated and so on. So, when you produce the power with dollar cost, and you sell it to your consumer in cedis, and you have this problem of an unstable currency, a currency which is constantly losing value and so on, it creates a problem for you. Huge problem. That problem itself has led to complaints of high cost of power, okay, which has necessitated a situation in which your Public Utility Regulations Commission has had to control tariffs. And the operators have constantly been telling us that the tariff regime does not make it possible for them to even break even. And you have this tariff regime because of the high cost to the consumer, which is largely dictated by your collapsing currency. How does privatization solve this problem? Somebody should tell me how privatization solves this problem. It doesn't. You understand? It doesn't. Now, the other thing that is important, and again, Solomon Owusu raised it, and I agree with him. There's a national security angle to power. Everything depends on power. In a modern environment, everything depends on power. Your health system depends on power. Your agriculture depends on power. Industrialization depends on power. Education depends on power. You understand what I'm saying? We are hooked to power. So if you decide that foreigners should come and take over, foreign hostile interests, not all foreign interests are hostile, but foreign hostile interests should come and take over your power distribution, you are surrendering a very important aspect of your national life, or indeed the most important aspects of your national life, to hostile interests. Then again, you see, when you engage in production, it doesn't matter whether you are producing power, or you are producing sugarcane, or you are whatever you are producing. You can generate what we call monetary profit. You can accumulate monetary profit, and you can also accumulate social profit. You understand? Social profit is measured usually in terms of the well-being of your people. You know, the extent to which your people become enlightened, the extent to which your people become aware of their history, the extent to which a sense of patriotism is injected into your people, and so on. Those are social profits. Now, what measurement are we using today in all this talk about privatization? It seems to me that the only measurement we are using is the accumulation of monetary profit. You understand? In any case, if you use monetary profit as the yardstick, it will be generated, but under private control, you don't benefit from the generation of monetary profit. Indeed, some have argued that you can derive benefits from the accumulation of monetary profit by private capital by taxation, through taxation. You can tax them, take some money, and use it for social development and so on. But you and I do know that these private companies which come to invest in our part of the world, doesn't matter whether they are investing in gold production or manganese or whatever. One of the conditions for bringing the investments into our country is tax holidays. You know that. And the record is there, tax holidays and so on. So even the argument that through taxation, we can take some resources in other, to develop the social sector and so on, collapses in the face of this tax exemptions and so on, that they demand and they get. Now, SENA, I want anybody to prove to us that close to 7 million Ghanaians voted for His Excellency John Dramani Mahama to become president because they believed that he was going to privatize the energy sector. It's not true.
And you voted for the manifesto.
How many other things were in the manifesto?
Including the privatization.
But can you tell me, as a matter of fact, that we voted for John Mahama to become president because he was going to privatize the energy sector? That's a conjecture which has no legs to stand on.
We didn't promise to privatize
No, I'm saying that even if you promised, one of 1,000 promises and so on, there could have been other promises which were heavily weighted as against privatization. So there's no way anybody is going to convince me that we voted for NDC or we voted for President Mahama because he was going to privatize. It wouldn't make sense. Because mind you, privatization has been resisted across the ages. The trade unions, the left organizations and so on, have over the last 40 years been resisting privatization. Seriously. You understand? Now, I recall in 1982, I think, 82, 83, when we embarked on this reckless and senseless path of privatization. Quite apart from the fact that we privatized over 400 state enterprises and so on, we did other foolish things. In order to introduce the neoliberal order and to entrench it, one of the things that happened in 1 year, 12 months, and again, I'm very happy that Alhaji Alhaji is here. 300,000 Ghanaian workers lost their jobs. Retrenchment of labor. 300,000 Ghanaian workers lost their jobs. Take that cost and weigh it against the so-called gains that we are going to get from privatization and so on. Reckless privatization led to 300,000 workers losing their jobs. Now, since the new government indicated that it was likely to privatize, in fact, the phrase they used was that privatization is on the table. The resistance has started building up. The Public Utility Workers Union has issued one of the strongest statements that I've ever seen, indicating that they will resist privatization. And they give very good reasons why privatization will be resisted. One, they are talking about problems of corruption and inefficiency in the Electricity Company of Ghana. I'm not going to argue with that. Let's say that Electricity Company of Ghana is inefficient. There's corruption in Electricity Company of Ghana and so on. My brother, if we go to an election and we mandate a government to come and manage not just the electricity sector, but all the different sectors, and the government raises his hand and says, hey, as for Electricity Company of Ghana, I can't deal with the problems there, so let private people come and deal with it. What kind of government is that? That government is not worth our mandate. You understand? If you come and tell us that because there are so many problems in the Electricity Company of Ghana, you can't handle them, so we are going to bring private people to come and handle them. Why did you take our mandate in the first place? I mean, if you are so incompetent, so useless, to the extent that you cannot deal with two problems of Electricity Company of Ghana, why should we give the whole country to you? So that argument must be dropped as quickly as possible. It's a bad argument. It's an argument which says that we have elected a government which is incapable of dealing with the very problems for which we elected it. So they should drop it. I've heard a lot of silly slogans over the years, very silly slogans over the years. Some of the slogans have said, for example, that, private capital is the engine of growth. You've heard it.
Private sector is the engine of growth.
Private sector or private capital is the engine of growth. What does that mean? Government has no business doing business, and so on. All those silly slogans, they've been bandied around and so on. My brother, watch. Anytime we elect a new government, those so-called private sector operators, they come running like Usain Bolt into government. They abandon the private sector, true or false? Sure. And I'll give you a long history of the multitudes of so-called experts who ran away from the private sector, which is supposed to be engine of growth, which is supposed to be the basis of everything and so on, running to the government sector. If they are truly the engine of growth, why don't they remain in the private sector? Why do they run into the public sector? Let's think. My friend, let's think. Let's think small. Let's ask basic questions, okay? Now, one of the concerns of the Public Utility Workers Union is this issue of retrenchment of labor. Because every privatization has come along with retrenchment of labor. And they've raised it very seriously, okay? I believe very strongly that, this question of retrenchment of labor, it happens largely because we fail to identify the sources, the real sources of the problems which confront us. In any case, the payroll of public institutions being bloated and so on, how does it come about? Tell me, how does it come about? Is these same irresponsible governments who are not able to create jobs and so on, who decide to pack the state enterprises with their cronies and so on in order to win votes for the next election? If I lie, tell me. As we speak, and if I'm lying, tell me. The NPP administration, in some state sectors, one or two, have employed so many people that they don't even have desks to sit on. Huh? Is that because it's a state enterprise? Is that because it's a state concern? That is not the fault of running a state enterprise. That arises out of electing reckless buccaneers into government. People who are incapable of thinking, who stopped thinking many years ago. If you elect them into government, that is how things happen. You understand? They will overload your enterprises, they will overload public institutions, knowing fully well that the only objective there is to win the next election, not to improve those institutions as well. How does that problem get cured by privatization? Show me how that problem gets cured by privatization. How does that get cured by privatization?
The private person comes, you will not allow those people to be put there. The bloating of that sector. If a private man is there, you will not allow that sector to be bloated with party functionaries. So in effect, you are giving meaning to why there has to be privatization.
No, I'm not.
That is what this position is.
I'm saying that problem can be cured.
Yes.
Not by recourse to the private sector,
yes,
but to the prudent management of state institutions, which can be done by those we elect.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
There's a problem which can be cured by primary school children. That's small thinking. You cure this problem. You don't need to go and bring Bill Gates and so on to come and cure this problem for you. All of us sitting around this table, Don't we have a solution to that problem? Do you need to go and bring electricity company of France to come and deal with that problem? So the point I'm making is that that's a problem which is created by the bald heads, you know, that we elect into government. That is the problem which is created because we elect a bunch of buccaneers into government. You elect a bunch of stupid people into government. You elect people into government who are not looking into the future, who do not concern about the viability of state enterprises and so on. You elect people into government whose only concern is how to win the next election, so that they can keep the privileges that winning elections give them. That's the problem. And that problem is not curable by the private sector. That's a problem you don't cure by the private sector. Okay? Now, my sister and my brothers. I wish I could say my brothers and sisters. But my sister and my brothers. This whole privatization of ECG, what is it intended to cure? One of the major problems we have in the electricity subsector has to do with what is called technical losses. One of the major problems, technical losses. Sometimes it is referred to as line losses. Okay, so now the argument has been that if you bring in the private sector, they will bring in money to modernize the distribution system and to reduce line losses and so on. Now, the private sector, why is it going to take that money to come and invest? Our own banks or foreign banks and so on. Now, if private people can go and borrow money in order to invest, how come that all of us 32 million people put together cannot borrow the money?
We can borrow.
So what is the need for private capital?
When we borrow and we invest, it's still like fetching water into a basket. The hole is still there and you borrow.
So fetch water and don't put it into a basket.
Yes.
Fetch the water and put it in a sealed container.
That's right.
And that is possible. Okay? Yeah. That is possible. Now, recently, we tried privatization. Recently, not long ago. Within the last 8 years, we tried privatization of ECG. You saw the scandals that emerged. The PDS scandals, you saw. You know how much money we lost through that privatization effort? So, for me, privatization is no. We need to make our power sector more efficient. We need to produce power. To run all the things that we want to run, especially when we hear about 24-hour economy and so on, you see the importance of generating a lot more power and so on. But let's not generate power in order to increase the pockets, the size of the pockets of the capitalists. Let us generate power in order to solve the real practical problems that confront us. Now, my brother, there's another argument. Who is the major consumer of the power we produce in this country? Who? It's government of Ghana. In fact, the government of Ghana consumes the largest part of the power which is produced in this country. Okay. So, if you privatize, what are you going to do? The government of Ghana then becomes hostage to private capital. You understand? Because the government of Ghana, for some time to come, will continue to be the largest consumer of the power we produce. So we are going to take government resources and hand it over to private capital. What sense does that make? Government is a major consumer of electric power. In any case, ECG will tell you that one of their biggest problems has to do with the supply of power to state institutions like the ministries, departments, agencies, hospitals, schools, and so on, which is not paid for. So if government were paying its bills, we would not have the crisis that we have now. So are you telling me that when it is state-run, you won't pay your bills? But when it is run by private capital, you pay your bills. Is that how sensible we are? Because if you hand it over to private capital and you don't pay your bills, as you are not paying your bills now, they'll have the same crisis.
They will cut you off. They will disconnect you.
Fantastic.
Government can disconnect.
Recently, we had a situation in which the Parliament of Ghana was so heavily indebted, okay? We had a situation in which the major teaching hospital in this country was so heavily indebted. So you said that the sensible thing that will happen is that if they don't pay, they'll be disconnected. So your parliament will be disabled, your hospitals will be disabled, your schools will be disabled.
They have to be disabled.
That's why they migrated.
Because the point is that me as a private person,
it hasn't happened yet.
As a private person, I pay my electricity bill every month. In fact, the ECG owes me prepaid. I pay before they supply me. Why must government use power without not paying? And which private entity would allow that to happen?
I'm not saying that government should use power without paying.
Yes.
I'm saying that for some reason, our government is unable to pay. And if you want us to go into that, we will go into that. But for some reason, our government is unable to pay. If you have the private sector, and our government is still unable to pay, all your vital infrastructure will be shut down.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you why our government is not able to pay its bills. You see, right now, as we sit in the studio, the evidence given by government institutions themselves, including the Ministry of Finance, is that we need 128% of total national revenue for 3 line items: debt servicing, debt repayment, and public sector wages and salaries. This is our situation. The country is bankrupt. That is why government is not able to pay its bills.
Yes.
Okay?
I agree.
Okay. So it's not just that government just feels that it cannot pay the bills, should not pay the bills, and so on and so on. It is not there. The there is not there to pay. So we need to look at the energy sector, indeed all the sectors, within the framework of how Ghana ought to move out of bankruptcy. The real question is, how do we move Ghana out of bankruptcy? The real sector is not, the real question is not whether we are paying our bills or we are not paying our bills. We are bankrupt. And that bankruptcy affects everything.
Yes.
Unless you are arguing that we should give government to the private sector.
No. But you have made the point you are making right now, Mr. President. I'm not cutting you, but just a small one. That government is bankrupt.
I don't mind if you intervene.
Yeah. Government is bankrupt. Government, the reason why we are where we are is that we have overborrowed ourselves. So why do they want to burden government again? Because what is happening to ECG is reinvestment. And for government to reinvest in ECG means it has to go and borrow more to burden the already burdensome situation. So why wouldn't you free that space, get a private person to come in and invest, and rather legislate that the private sector cannot overcharge?
Get the private sector to also go and borrow.
Yes.
Which borrowing eventually we will pay for it.
Exactly
You know. But let me make the point.
Okay.
Let me make the point. Why is this country bankrupt?
This country.
Why is this country bankrupt? Why can't government find the resources to pay for the power it consumes and so on? This country is bankrupt because of the model of development we are running. Recently, Dr. Sesam told us something. That the Ghanaian interest in gold mining is less than 1%.
Yes.
Why won't you be bankrupt? I'm not the one saying it. Dr. Sesam told us. Okay? So if you take gold mining, we are not there. Whatever sector you take, we are not there. We've surrendered our interests to foreign monopolies. That system ought to change. And I believe that when we went to the last elections, people voted so overwhelmingly for President Dramani Mahama and the NDC because they expected that this model of development which has driven us into bankruptcy will change. That there will be a new thinking, imaginative thinking, which will place the resources of Ghana in the hands of the Ghanaian people and which will ensure that the resources of Ghana will be exploited for the benefit of the Ghanaian people in order for us to get out of this bankruptcy. But what I'm hearing now is simply that we are going back to the old foolish ways. That is what I'm hearing now. You understand? I'll give you a few examples. Ghana is supposed to be the biggest producer of gold in Africa now. The biggest producer of gold in Africa. In fact, the 5th largest producer of gold in the whole world. That is our status now. Now tell me one good reason why the gold we mine is not sold in Ghana. Because just selling the gold in Ghana, forget about who mines and who does everything, just selling it in Ghana. The economic benefits which accrue to Ghana is unimaginable. Botswana, they used to get nothing out of their diamond exploitation until they decided to establish gold, diamond trading in Botswana. The statistics are there. Look at how much progress they have made in terms of maximizing their revenue on diamonds and so on. Now, I'll give you another example, very near here. When the soldiers took power in Niger, all hell broke loose. Soldiers are taking power. We want democracy and so on. At the time the soldiers took power in Niger, Niger was one of the 3 poorest countries in the world. Anybody to challenge that? In 1 year, Niger has become the fastest growing economy in the world. Shouldn't we be asking ourselves what they did right, which we have not been able to do all these years? Shouldn't we be asking ourselves what these soldiers that we don't like, we said that they don't believe in democracy and so on. Within 1 year, look at the significant turn around. So why don't we start thinking? Why can't our leaders think? Master, if they can't think, maybe you can even forgive them. Copying too. Just copy too, they can't do. Abba! What is this? What did Niger do right, which we can do? They didn't privatize their electricity company. They didn't privatize it. It's not one of the things that they did. Look, increasingly, the masses are getting tired and fed up with all these politicians who have no solution beyond privatization. Because the masses know that this privatization has never worked and it will never work. So you, these politicians who have no solution, please don't come for our power. Because if you come for our power and we realize that you have no solution, you are just taking us in a merry-go-round and so on, we will kick you out of power. And be careful, because next time, you may not be kicked out of power through the ballot box. There may be other ways, ingenious ways of kicking you out of power, which may not be pleasant.
Thank you.
Mr. Pratt has spoken as a true socialist, but privatization also has advantages. We privatize with local businesses.
Well, it's true that privatization has ups and downs, but it has got benefits. Even this studio that we are sitting in,
it's a private.
It's a private. Until they open the airways.
But it was set up by the private.
So the competition, and we are looking at We're not saying that privatization is the cure.
No.
But we're looking at what benefits, if properly managed, can privatization bring to the people. Today, we're getting quality information and to make decisions concerning us because we opened up the airspace. You have ever asked yourself why coup d'etats cannot succeed or will find it difficult to succeed in Ghana? In the past, you just needed to march to the GBC, take hold of the mic and announce. Today, you need to go to all the radio stations and announce.
1,000 radio stations.
Yes, so privatization is, there are aspects. We used to go and sleep at the transport yard to get a ticket to travel. I don't know whether you were a fisher, but I used to go and sleep there. Today we don't need to. Go to the transport station, just go to Circle, you will get a bus and go. That is the infusion of capital and liberalizing. But the way you do it is what should be the question. Even in Soviet, the Russia now, it's private capital. It's private capital. So what I'm saying is that, how do we do it to benefit? The end result of any decision of government must be that, how does it benefit the people? That's the end decision. So how do we inject in ideas that will benefit the people? If we do that, whether it's mixing socialism and capitalism, China has grown because they fused the two systems. It has grown. So yes, I think that, and I agree entirely with Mr. Kosiprat, that when you do it blindly, foolishly, it won't produce any result. In the past, Mr. Kosiprat, you used to travel a lot to Tamale. You will have to arrange either for a military aircraft to pick you, or you pay through your nose to go by air. When we allowed private capital to come in, airfares reduced up to less than $100. Airfares. So obviously privatization has benefits, but it is the way you do it. If you just think that handing over the state institution, Table Dry Dock was the best dry dock that Nkrumah had built. We privatized it, it collapsed. No, so it's the way. It's the way and manner you go about it. It is not the privatization. It's the way, and you have given two examples. Why has Movenpick succeeded? And the others. So it's the way we do it. So let's look at it and see, how do we do it in such a... I agree entirely that when a private man comes, he's looking for his profit.
Yes.
But what... So John Rawls said that the dangers of capitalism can only be mitigated by strong social institutions with a sense of justice. That's what John Rawls says. The dangers of capitalism can only be mitigated by strong social institutions with a sense of justice. So how do we do that?
The examples you give are exceedingly interesting. And you've been my friend for a very long time. At least one of the things that I know about you is that you are honest. Okay. You talk about traveling to Tamale. And the fact that in the past you needed to go and queue to get a bus to Tamale. Yeah, I would grant that. I would not argue with that. Okay. But you do know that now people cannot even go and queue because they simply cannot afford it at all. They don't go there because they can't pay the fare. You know that. And you as an MP know the number of times people have come to you from your constituency because they come to Accra and they are stranded. They can't afford to go back.
The function of the poverty.
Absolutely.
The function of the poverty.
The masses are
Please. So you know that.
Yes, the poverty.
Yeah. Oh, so it has led to the exacerbation of poverty. Fine.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Poverty, yeah.
That's a good point. I've heard people like us. And of course, you do know that people like us sitting around here are not downtrodden people. You understand? And I've heard us say that, oh, At least now if you go to the shops, everything is there. Yes, it is true if you go to the supermarkets, everything is there, from fanciful goods and so on. There are millions of our people who cannot go to that shop.
Yes.
They simply cannot afford, they're excluded. So the fact of the goods being available on the shelves is not proof that the people's access has improved and so on. Now, Alhaji, you did something very interesting. You quoted airfares in dollars. Try quoting it in cedis. Today, a return trip to Tamale is about 3,000 cedis. Alai?
Yes, about 3,000, yes.
When I started flying to Tamale, it was about 300 cedis.
Yes, but the same dollars.
The same dollars.
So why don't you calculate it in the cedis that you're working?
That is the function of the government.
So it depends on what currency you choose. Now, if you choose the prices in dollars, you actually hide, you mask the fact that the cost is going up. For the ordinary Ghanaian who doesn't earn dollars, for people working in the ministries and so on, cost of airfares is rising, it's not falling. Imagine, I used to pay about 300 cedis to go to Tamale and back. Now it's 3,000.
But maybe the 300 cedis value is the same as 3,000 cedis today. Because we are talking about
how does that matter?
No, because the point is that
how does that matter?
300 cedis in the year you are talking about. Let's go and check the dollar equivalent.
Why should I check the dollar?
But that is what it is, Mr. Pratt. The point is that
Solomon. Yes. The man sitting here is working here in the Ministry of Local Government.
Fantastic.
He's being paid in cedis. He's spending his money to improve his life in cedis.
Yes.
Why does he always have to convert to dollar?
Okay, then we can do the time value of your 300 cedis in say 1992 to today. You can.
You are wasting your time with this. Your time. The Ghanaian here who is working here and earning cedis, cost is improved. It's increasing.
What
Becoming unable to afford the service. That's the point.
But what? And that's the reason why the alternative.
Privatization.
So you can't afford the airfare. You go with the bus.
Yes.
And you choose whether you want electric bus or you want step down. So all those are catered for. We can't put a blanket, on everything.
Gabriela, you are an important politician in Ghana. You are a very important politician. Are you in all honesty telling me that the only fares which have gone up are airfares and that transport fares have not gone up? The constituents of Alhaji who come to him for transport fare to go back because they are stranded, they don't fly. They go by road.
But so is it caused by the private sector?
No.
So that we are discussing the private sector.
Listen. I'm not saying that it is caused by the private sector. I'm saying that when your government stops thinking, when your governments refuse to tackle the real problems that face the people and resort to useless slogans like private sector is the engine of growth and so on, we don't mean anything. The real problem, you mask over them. The problems continue to stay. That's what I'm saying.
So it's not that private sector participation is not good. Is that what?
Private sector participation is horrible.
I disagree.
Thank you. We have to bring this particular discussion to a close. We have 1 hour more to go. So first, you mentioned the pool statement, and Pool makes a very interesting point. He said it is however refreshing and heartwarming to note the enthusiasm of commentators and other interest groups attempting to offer solutions in addressing the energy sector challenges, for that matter, the utility concerns of Ghanaians. We have observed with keen interest comments, recommendations, and suggestions that need to be taken to sustain the energy sector using information available to them, without providing any proof of success or stakeholder engagement they have undertaken to arrive at the conclusion. Pool of TUC Ghana is not unaware of many interest groups, locally and abroad, when it comes to investment in the power and energy sector. We are also aware of many who paraded the corridors of power with interest in ECG in the past and have metamorphosed and resurfaced to continue their game. We can vividly recall the engagement we had with the previous NDC administration regarding the issues of power distributor ECG, who of TUC Ghana wishes to reaffirm that its position on ECG privatization and management remains unchanged and believe the best alternative presented stands as the best for Ghanaians and other stakeholders.
What's the alternative that they have?
It means, no, it means that
That is a problem we have with it.
yeah, that's the part of the statement.
Statement.
Yes, and it continues that while the power distributor is heavily controlled and managed by politicians, we have continuously expressed our disquiet on the cost of input in running the power sector, which will invariably be factored in electricity pricing. Who of TUC wishes His Excellency John Dramani Mahama the best in your tenure and promise to work closely, but that's essentially the statement that they made.
But the solution to the problem was not professed in this statement. Is that what it is? It is in there.
So you see, the effort of the power sector, my knowledge of the power sector is a combination of many things. Yes, they demonstrated that a VRA has been able to do it. No white man, since the establishment of VRA, has worked there. We use Ghanaian engineers, and they have produced the power. Until government could no longer invest in generation plants. That's why we brought in foreigners to invest in generation plants. If government had resources to put in plants, VRA would have managed it. So I have no doubt about that. And I believe that Ghanaians have got the competence and the expertise to do that. Except that they are not following up on their key performance indicators.
Okay.
Now, there's one small. We know that the price of aluminum on the international market is dropping heavily. We know that.
We know that, yeah.
And by the assessment we have done, there's no way that VALCO can pay for the full cost of energy supply to VALCO. We know that as a fact. We know.
Yeah.
Okay. So if government decides that the cheapest power generated, hydro, 3 cents per kilowatt hour and so on, should be given to VALCO, which cannot pay for it and so on, how do you turn around to blame anybody else? That's a government decision. What's the cost-benefit analysis we have done with regards to the supply of power to VALCO? So let's think, let's be open-minded and find solutions to the problems.
So
and stop
again, so this matter came up when I was at the ministry. So if you subsidize, so yes, it's true and it's very right. Government consigned energy produced by hydro to VALCO. So government doesn't export energy produced by VALCO, maybe by Akosombo or Pom. Now, so then you go downstream. You know, VALCO cannot recover cost because alumina, the price is dropping. In fact, in Ghana, we even got surprise demand for power because they're not using all their turbines. They're just using a few. Now, what happens? So if VALCO is working, Ghanaians are going to be working there. It generates a lot of businesses. So you are going to net off the loss that VALCO is going to make just selling alumina with all the businesses that are going to be created and the taxes that are going to be paid by the businesses to complement what VALCO is going to lose. Now, whether...
Have you seen the Akila Kwasua report?
Yes, I've seen it. I work with Akila Kwasua. Yeah, I work with him.
On the supply of power to VALCO.
Yes, I worked with him. Yes.
I'm happy you have seen it.
Yes.
Because even if you net off, it doesn't balance. Even if you net off, it doesn't balance.
As a socialist, you shouldn't
argue
this way.
Because that is the argument. No. That's the argument we are making about netting off. And I'm saying that I've read the Akila Kwasua report.
There's a socialist argument that involves Nkrumah to establish the
Akila Kwasua provides a solution to the problem. Nobody implemented the solution.
So on this occasion, you increase the price to VALCO. VALCO gets shut down. People are thrown out. And how would that help the country? From the socialist point of view.
Master, you are not quoting me.
No,
You are imagining.
yes, imagination.
You are dreaming about what you think I would have said. What you are actually doing is you are erecting your own dummies, you are shooting your dummies, and you are clapping.
And I'll be good.
You are being an excellent marksman. You are not a marksman. You understand?
Okay, that's all.
Why? You know the solution which was provided for dealing with that vacuum problem. You know.
I know.
Well, thank you. We have to move on to our very, very second discussion. That's the first week of the Mahama administration. In fact, they are now in their second week. I think the promise by President Mahama is to do all appointments within the first 2 weeks. So far, 25 in terms of ministerial. 35 more to go. A lot more being expected. In fact, at some point, I started getting disappointed in the government, and I realized it's 1 week. Because of the way in which people are responding. The MP has been very critical, oral, about appointments committee. Their leader does 3 hours, and then they said they don't have enough time, among others. So we'll talk about that. We'll spend the amount of time we have talking about the first week of the John Mahama administration and the observations. I'll start with Alhaji this time around.
I think that what just first week of
Yes, because yes.
We won't talk about oral. We won't talk about.
No, you can. You feel you have to put all the.
Okay.
Yes. Whatever you want to talk about.
You choose.
So okay, the first week of Mahama has shown a remarkable departure from the Mahama that we had in 2013. Obviously, some of us have been vindicated. We had said that having stayed at the Flagstaff House for 4 years and having lost power, Mahama was a better leader now because he will take all the experiences that he garnered when he was in the Flagstaff House. And now when he lost, people, the way people related to him, the way people saw him, the way people dealt with him was going to inform how he will act in government. Now, the promises captured in the manifesto clearly were a very thought-out processes, and which culminated into a set of policy prescriptions and promises that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama and the NDC government intends to implement in the next 4 years. It says 60 ministers. 60 ministers was informed by the large number of ministers appointed by Nana Akufo-Addo. And these ministers were mostly ministers who lacked capacity and competence to steer the affairs of the country, and those largely ministers appointed because Nana Akufo-Addo thought he should reward the guys. I mean, I've always said, somebody like Solomon also, I'm not saying so because he's here, understands the ruminants of governance, communicates very well, is passionate, has got fire in his belly, he wants to achieve. I mean, he was on the wrong side of Nana Akufo-Addo. The scales did not tilt in his favor. So he was not going to say, are you a good friend, or is he my good friend? Asebe Yeboah, chairman of the finance committee. You know, you Asebe, very good. He was on the wrong side of the scale. And in fact, Nana Akufo-Addo even removed him from power because he prioritized the head of the Free Zones Board over him. And so all these experiences are informing John Dramani Mahama in the way. So you can see clearly that in the first ministers of state that he appointed, he took ministers or persons who were members of parliament who had deputized their ministers and who showed some level of learning and understanding of what it takes to be a minister, and then escalated them, promoted them to the ministerial position. The second set of ministers is also quite reflective of what he did in the first 3 ministers. Very solid guys. I didn't know Agnes na Lomo Lati, but
Momo Lati.
MPs, yeah, but we're reading her CV. I'm convinced that she will be a good minister. In fact, so far, 3 women or ladies, the women don't want to be called, the ladies don't want to be called women, ladies have been appointed, and I'm sure, I pray that in the next batch of ministers, more will make it to the list, so that, I mean, we can have the inclusiveness that we preached. I mean, this, and I like philosophy as part of my law course. Plato has said so many years ago that you can't keep 1/2 of your population perpetually suppressed and hope to develop. You're suppressing 1/2 of the intelligence of your country or community that can help develop that country. So let's bring them on board and see. So very great. For the vetting committee, I have serious, and I said it before. You remember I said it here. Many people disagree with me. It appears to me, Parliament, and then you go argue that, and on the floor we'll see what happened. It appears to me that Parliament is making a big mistake. You see, in 1969, we had the Republican Constitution. We practiced the Westminster type of government. And so only members of Parliament could become ministers of state. Go check the 1969 Constitution. There was no requirement of vetting. There was no. Because the highest standard of being a minister, parliamentarian. So if a person is elected minister, that person is otherwise qualified to be a minister. Elected MPs. Then in the 1979, because Wusia failed us, we decided to experiment with the presidential system of government. No member of parliament could become a minister of state. A la Harisoya. So when Harisoya was elected MP and was nominated by Liman to be minister, Harisoya had to resign his position as member of parliament to take a ministerial position. So because members, people who were qualified to be ministers of state were not members of parliament, that requirement was inserted in the 1979 Constitution that such persons must be qualified to be members of parliament. And so the nomination and appointment of such persons must be with prior approval of parliament. Then in 1992, we decided to fuse the two systems. And so we brought the two systems together in Article 78(1). Qualified to, you can select the ministers from parliament or persons qualified to be members of parliament. So you have the 1969 and the 1979. And now, because that the underlying or the concluding phrase is that with prior approval. So we have read that to mean with prior approval regulates both members of parliament and non-members of parliament. So it has made parliament to go on a wild goose chase. That's why Afonso Marcus spent 3 hours. What was he seeking to achieve? Because that person was a member of parliament. He was qualified as a member of parliament. The vetting of ministers of state is not intended to test competence. Competence is a political question. If a president decides to put incompetent people in office, in 4 years' time, the people will show that president and the party the back door. So clearly, I believe that Parliament has a responsibility, if they want to continue with this system, to come out with regulations on how vetting ought to be done, so that nobody can hold the whole country hosted for 3 hours and still say that his questions was truncated. No one can say that. Let's set parameters and give time limits, so that Ghanaians don't want to waste productive hours sitting down and listening to one person for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. No, we don't want that. The fact is that the MP was working, and others had to abandon their work to listen to him. And so the last one is oral. The Dogombe say that If you hear thief in the market, and you have not stolen, you don't take to your feet. You don't run. Okay? So if you hear oral, and you think that you are not part of any loot, but oral is a platform. Look, when you take the Whistleblowers Act, the Whistleblowers Act is just simply about oral. That if you have reasons to believe that somebody, reasonable believe that somebody while in office or your employee as a businessman failed to pay the tax or conducted him or herself inappropriately and occasion loss to the state in terms of revenue, disclose. Section 3 of the Whistleblowers Act lists all the people a disclosure can be made to. And it includes, in Section 3(1)(p), subsection P, it includes the president. Don't know how we're going to get the president. So the president said, look, and then even before that, Article 286 of the Constitution says that after the declaration to the Auditor General of assets, if you come into new assets that cannot be reasonably attributed to your income, gifts, loan, inheritance, you will be deemed to have acquired that asset in contravention of the Constitution. That is illegally. How do we establish that? If we see somebody having built a palace, how do we establish that that fellow has? So, and then lastly, Solomon, you all know when we were doing the campaign, corruption, wastage, recklessness, thievery was on the top of the agenda. And today I'll send you back to John Rawls again. He says, debate and deliberations during electioneering is more important than voting. Okay, it's more important than voting. So if the debate and deliberations clearly showed that Ghanaians appreciated what we're discussing and voted a government that was willing to put in institutional mechanisms to check corruption in this country. And that government or party had provided for it in the manifesto that they will set up an Operation Recover All Loot platform to recover the loot. And they are on that way, that path. That is not an investigative body. This is a preliminary gathering evidence. Which evidence would have gone to the president? The president says, go, I'm setting up this committee and I'm gathering you gather the evidence and let me have it. When the evidence is gathered, they will be sent to the appropriate quarters. And then the Attorney General will determine which forum to send this. If it is a tax matter, it goes to the Internal Revenue. And if it was about tax evasion, that's an offense. So you will dealt with. If it's about money laundering, it goes to IOCO. If it is about a corruption, it goes to the special prosecutor. So it is not this platform, it's just to gather evidence and ensure that we recover all the loot. And I've heard people now talk about public tribunals. They are tribunals, they are not public, they are tribunals. The public tribunals was reminiscent of the PNDC days. But when they entered the Constitution, they entered it as tribunals. And Thursday, Mr. Kosopra was at pains to point out that tribunal system is not strange to the Constitution, even at the lowest level. So you have when the Public Accounts Committee surcharges people, the Constitution mandates the Chief Justice to set up a tribunal. So a tribunal is not unknown to the Constitution. So you see, so the people should not think that we're going back. We're just doing, and now I've said elsewhere that in my view, Operation Recover All Loot is the boldest drive yet in our anti-corruption fight. The boldest that the president and his government is willing to go the extra length to hold people accountable. And he has indicated that it is not a post-regime accountability. Even his ministers will be subjected to that level of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Margaret from Pong. Tamale says our leaders must prove their competencies in solving the problems confronting the country. Else, they have no business in occupying those offices. Privatization of the energy sector will not solve the problem because over the years it has worsened our plight, and any wise and serious leader will consider different ways of tackling the problem and not privatization. We citizens must make sure people we put in offices will make policies that will benefit the citizens of this country. Our leaders must start thinking. Is it Ken Williams? Yes, Hong Tamalia says, oral or no oral, MPP will account for their daily scandal, state capture, destruction of businesses, livelihoods, water bodies, and the political killings in Ijura, Techima, Mboko, etc. Was MPP backed by laws to rob pensioners of their funds by DDEP? Did they have legal backings to arm party thugs with guns and military uniforms to shoot voters at polling stations? What's the legal basis for Delta forces to snatch cars and houses from the past officials in 2017? Was it legal to engage in proceed on leave against ever like Mr. Domelevo, who are locked out of their offices? The culture of impunity is over, and the law will work without fear or favor. Mr. Osu.
Will work without fear or favor. Well, 1 week of President Mohammed's administration, he went to the people of this country, sold his message. The people of this country had their own issues, and key among the issues that the people had was the destruction of the environment, which is Galamsey, unemployment, corruption, as Honorable said, and above all, you remember the LGBTQ plus issue. So these were the 4 key issues that Ghanaians voted on. They saw the movement for change, great transformational plan. They said no, it was not right for 2025. They saw the bold solution manifesto from the New Patriotic Party. They said no, it was not right. They said they would rather go with the 24-hour economy manifesto. And I believe that the appointees that he's appointing should know that in whatever they do, they would help the president to achieve all these promises he made to the good people of this country. I have said time with that number that I don't believe in CVs, because if CVs were working, I'm not sure Ghana would have had 23.8% inflation as of December. The former vice president had a very beautiful CV, a CV that should have dealt with our inflation, that should have dealt with our interest rate, that should have dealt with all the macroeconomic indicators. But at the end of the day, it turned out that it was a mere CV. So vetting, really, I don't take keen interest in it. What matters to me is you were given a position as a minister of, say, energy. We are looking forward to a stable energy situation, to a reduced cost of energy. After your tenure, that's 4 years' time, when you go back to the people, you must be able to account that when I came, I was able to put the lights on for you. I managed to reduce the cost of electricity. That is how I would evaluate your performance. You came in as a Minister of Education. Mind you, those that have been voted out, if they were good, they would have continued. But because they were not performing, they were booted out. You are the Education Minister. Schools do not have textbooks. Students are struggling. In the boarding houses, the free SHS is having problems. Your evaluation will be how well you manage to turn around things. So I don't have any problem with the names that he has put. After all, we have given him the mandate to lead. And to the extent that these people are, most of them are members of parliament, it means they so qualified to occupy the positions. My only observation, small observation, is that I don't know whether it's a party strategy. The front liners of the NDC in parliament are all going to be ministers. I don't know what sort of strategy is that. Because every institution, you need institutional memory. So that is a part. If you go to the regions too, some regional executives have been pushed into becoming regional ministers. How do you account for that? Because mind you, in 2028, my candidate Alan will come back. But the NDC will have a change of candidate. So it is not a straightforward journey. And also, there are certain positions that require technical competence. Not just anybody to occupy, but you need, you see, because if the agencies require technical expertise and you fail to put a technical person there, then that ministry under which the agency falls must have a minister that with that technical know-how to back or to make up for the shortfall. He needs to check these things. I believe that the number of people who are NDC supporters must also understand that it's not everyone who can have position. I see a number of people very worried. I'm telling you, that is the reality of the day. People are worried that, you know, people follow political parties for various reasons. They believe that when Mr. A gets a position, that is true. It is true whom that president, he or she, can also be relevant. But it doesn't work like that. Governance is for all of us. If it was going to be so, then how about those of us who are not part of this administration? It doesn't mean we will be starved to death. No, we are all contributing to the kitty. We are paying taxes. And so it is for all of us. I would have loved to see a name like Dr. Obin in there. Tony Obin. Such a hard-working man. But yet it is about 35 names to go. He is a minor, right? Okay, maybe, yes, but when it comes, it will not be bad. And my sister sitting here with the gilly. If she doesn't get...
It's too big for me.
I'm talking about you getting a position so that I can come and worry you. You are here, you think I'm going to allow you come always with opposition mentality. Now you are in government. So begin to change. But you will not have it cheap here. You see, Ora and my NPP people, I said, my former party, I said the time with that number, that beyond what was happening to that party, the next problem that the party was going to face was the quality of representation. The NPP's problem now is not about even the numbers. Remember in 1996, the NPP had, together with the Independent Ghana, had about 66 or so. But what did the trick for the party in 2000 was the quality of representation in 1996. The J.H. Mensens, the Papa Uswankumes, the Nana Akufo-Addo himself, and so on and so forth. That is so much missing with the current make. Other than that, you cannot have a first-time MP, Gideon Buaku, together with John Dark, go to Parliament barely a week, and they begin to have press conferences so shallow. And I was like, hey, what is happening? How did we get to this point? Like Honorable was saying, if you have not looted, what is your business having a problem with a committee that is to recover looted assets? Are you not even ashamed holding a press conference against a body to recover stolen items for the state? When I heard the gentleman speak, I said, where did we go wrong? But hey, that is their party. Because if you have done series and sequence before, from 167 or 169 members of parliament to 137 to 88, if you do the mathematical computation, the next destination is 25 MPs. So if they are going to go on this tangent, then so be it. The vetting committee, you had opportunity of holding someone hostage for close to 4 hours. I have never seen any leader be held for that long period. And even if you were asking critical questions, I won't have problems. So, Gideon that came out to hold that press conference, you had an opportunity of asking a question. What question did you ask? It was there that you wanted to settle score with the majority leader on data you yourself. That data that he was talking about was provided to the vice president by Gideon Boku himself. So he wanted to establish that he was right then. Is this a question? And you want me to take you serious? No, so clearly people are losing their way. It is too early in the day. We are masters in opposition. I was in government but in opposition. They should humble themselves. It's a 4-year journey. Only 1 week you are crying. Hey, then when we get to September, November, they may not find their way out of this country. Because if the NDC fails to recover looted assets, I'm telling you, that will be the end. That will be, there are two critical issues, these looted assets and Galamsey. If the party dilly-dally with it and makes it business as usual, oh, you saw how the churches, the Catholic Church bishop, people decided to go and visit President Mahama to remind him of the LGBTQ. The Ghanaian is looking at certain indications that indeed the NDC and by extension President Mahama is ready to govern. I wish him the best of luck because his success will be the success for all of us. When President Kufuor came to power, some of us wanted to help him. He said we must be citizens. We listened to him carefully. And to be a citizen is not to hero worship or to bootlick. So when he started with 1.3 or 5 ministers, we said, hey, it was not good. Then he had people around him telling him that these people, they don't wish you well. They belong to the Alam faction. He got it wrong then. So anything that is wrong from the beginning. Let me also use this your medium to debunk a certain falsity that is going around, circulating on various platforms that Mr. Lanchemante has been offered acting director of 24-hour economy. Sometimes, you see, when people are even doing diabolics, they don't think deep into it. And this thing has traveled so far that people are calling. Is that how you... I said, no, what is this? Is there any ministry or institution called the 24-hour economy for someone to even be given acting director of that? How do you get yourself swayed by some of these things? So, on record, it is not true. Mr. Lanchemante has not gone for any position. What we have done as a movement is to submit our great transformation plan to the president. And that is what any good citizen does. If you have anything good, you submit it to the president. If he wants to implement something out of it, that is fine. If he does not, so be it. So that is on the record. I will end it here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I come to Gabriela, just a few more comments. This is Seldel Glad, who says, good morning, Senator. The point of the ECG as a monopoly and the issue of privatization, as remarked by Dr. Percy, should be considered. Living here in Germany and within the same region, I can get my power supply from a town different from where I'm living. If it's cheaper, it's all about the distribution system. Can we demonopolize the ECG? Should we have multiple distributors that allow people to even buy from them? That's from Sel Del Glad. Prince Henry Koforidua says, good morning. I'm asking from Ghanaians, all I'm asking from Ghanaians is to support the NDC government led by President John Mahama to deliver and give us the Ghana we want. As for the people talking against Oral, the future is pregnant. Oral has come to stay. That's Prince Henry, who said that. Musa Batwa also says, those who are raising concerns about Oral, if your hands are clean, why not remain calm? Oral is simply seeking accountability and addressing the looting of state property. Ghana is for all of us and accountability benefits everyone. Why demand legality now when similar initiatives like the Office of Accountability under President Kufuor were not to post? Let's focus on supporting Oral's mandate to ensure transparency and good governance rather than creating unnecessary discomfort. May the soul of Dr. Percy rest in perfect peace. There's Stephen Penn in Wa says, Oral is a preparatory team to assemble information about corruption and state land capture. Let me be fully aware that they are deeply involved and will be exposed big time, and their political fortunes going into the future will be in danger. Somebody should advise them to nicodemously return their loot to save themselves and their party. Stephen Penn said that from Wa, and thank you. And Hadi finally says, good morning, brother. Honestly, MPP is an enemy to the state. They will never change. Why do they hate this country called Ghana this much? Anytime MPP comes to power, Mother Ghana goes back 20 years. Who told them the MPP Aura is inviting people? Aura is not inviting anyone, but people who want to be free of nightmare are taking themselves there. So warning your people not to honor an invite from Aura is illogical. Gabriela?
First week of His Excellency John Dramani Mohammed's administration. I think so far so good. The appointments so far, with the exception of one that I'm not in favor with, I think the first batch that I'll state why I'm not in favor of that appointment. Okay. I'm not in favor of that appointment at all. But starting with the first batch that came, I mean, impeccable appointments. Dr. Ayeni, Dr. Atoforsen, Honorable John Jinapo, that trio, without a doubt, was a master stroke as his first appointment. The untouchable qualities, their competence is there. There are people who relate very well with the grassroots, so perfect. The second batch that came, I've heard people say things like, Honorable Haruna in education, he's going to be set up, and I totally disagree with those who are coming with that argument. I think that Honorable Haruna Idrisu in the Ministry of Education is a fantastic appointment. And you know, when Honorable Haruna was Minister for Employment and Social Welfare, he was part of the economic management team, and I was allowed to sit in their meetings. And their contributions when he was managing labor issues, you know, I think that for me, I think that he performed far better as a labor minister than as a trade minister, because he was somebody who could reach out easily to the unions. I think it probably has something to do with he being a former youth organizer. He was able to help to mobilize and reach out better to them before things aggravated and became strikes and all that. And so when you take a sector like education, that takes a chunk of our budget and has so many interest groups and unions. How to manage those groups, especially when you look at the full spectrum of, you have TEWU having their issues on one side, you have, what's the other group? Nagrat is there. There's another one in the tertiary side.
UTAG.
Is it UTAG? There's another group. The Polytechnic Union is called what? CTAG or something. They
colleges of education.
Training colleges. They wanted to go on strike last week.
So the Polytechnic is TUTAG. Technical University Tutors Association of Ghana.
No, it's the one that we just talked about, CTAG.
Okay.
So you have all these unions within the education bracket that you have to be able to engage and always try to lower tempers and try to come to some amicable consensus moving the whole sector forward. So it's one sector that, for me, Honorable Haruna, seeing him from that angle before and how he dealt with that portfolio, for me, he's the perfect person for the Ministry of Education. And mind you, going into this last election, one of the things that worked for the NDC was because the NPP had dealt so badly with Ghanaian workers. They have issues of allowances that have not been paid in the past. They've signed all kinds of agreements with them that we're going to increase salaries in this year, and so many other issues. Perfect appointment. Honorable Haruna Idrisu. Honorable Nalomo. Namomo. Yeah. She's one of the Greater Accra members of Parliament. Very nice woman. Very humble, intelligent, very engaging. And from the women's side, I think that she is also a very good appointment for gender. And that's most especially when we now have Professor Nana Jane leading the women front and all the promises we have made in affirmative action. It's time to practicalize all those policies. And you need somebody who is level-headed, who understands the gender issues. And I was having a conversation with my big sister yesterday. And I was explaining to her that, look, the reason why we have so many women in business in Ghana is not because we are generally drawn to business. But when you complete school and you want to enter into the world of work, if you and I go and apply for the same position, and even if I'm more qualified than you for that position, the likelihood of you being taken over me is higher. Because when they look at me single, I'm not going to get married, I'm going to have children, I'll be away from work 3 months, they'll do all those calculations and I'm stereotyped immediately. You, a gentleman, it's straightforward for you. Nobody takes you for paternity leave. Nobody is going to do anything with you. You go and sit at home for 9 months, carry pregnancy. In fact, you are perfect fit for the job. So women are generally within the working population trying to enter the job market. There's already a stigma that we have to fight. That glass ceiling is real for us. So many women, 1, 2, 3 attempts, you get faced with the same thing. You won't let your confidence take you down. You just shift in business. So there has to be a program, deliberate program, that encourages young girls, especially from that young age, to start thinking entrepreneurial, so that by the time they move into business, they are going in there as solidified entrepreneurs, business people who can now do more than just managing SMEs. You can build industrialization around those women. And it has to be a deliberate program that is championed. You need somebody who is level-headed, somebody who can see the vision, you understand, and who can support Professor Nana Jane in that regard. So if I take these 2 portfolios in the second list that came, perfect. And mind you, Honorable Haruna will also have to work under Professor Nana Jane as well. Yeah. So perfect pay. Now, the one I'm not so keen on, it has to do with my own region. To be very honest, the gentleman that we've nominated as Central Regional Minister is our first Vice Chairman. He's the same person who was acting chairman when our regional chairman was suspended. And to be very honest, I was not happy about how the regional front was divided for that 1 month. You see, and Central Region being Central Region as a swing region, there are certain things that you don't play with. We know how we campaigned in Central Region to take the 18 seats. You understand? So, for the Central Region, I'll make it clear, I'm not convinced about this regional minister, and I'm very sure that His Excellency will reshuffle him within his term. I'm not Professor Doom, but I'm not convinced. I don't have anything against him as a person. If I have problems with him as a person, I will not shy from telling him what I think as a person. But how the time when he was put in a leadership position to lead the regional front and how things were handled, and now to lead and extend it into a whole region where it's not just about we the NDC supporters in the region, it's how to keep to consolidate the gains we made in 2024 and make sure that in 2028 our job rather becomes easier and not difficult. When we go back to the people of Central Region and we tell them that, you know what, we've done so, keep us in government. So I'm not so convinced about that. But aside that, all the other appointments is good. It's good.
And as if your executives were not consulted on the choice.
When we had a meeting, we said we wanted an MP to be a regional minister. And the one who got it wasn't, the name wasn't even on our list.
Let me see. let me go to a few comments.
Are you not sure somebody has changed the name somewhere?
I don't know, but whoever did it, I hope they have a plan, because this one, I don't know.
Let's go to a few comments before we come to Mr. Pan. This is Ezina, okay, someone who has worked in the power sector, says it's about time Ghana stops subsidizing power supply to 11 gold mining multinational companies in Ghana with hydropower. You cannot allow the multinational companies to take our gold resource wealth free and then give them cheap power while Ghana only earn less than 15% of the billions of dollar revenues. Hydropower must be for local companies. That's Ezina. There's also, this one says, Mr. Ho, the solution to Africa's or Ghana's problems is not privatization. The problem we haven't spared the rod, spoiled the child. What does the private person do differently and goes on to succeed? Is the private person some kind of a superhuman having all wisdom and knowledge? Our leaders are hypocrites, liars, wicked, selfish, greedy, murderous, deceitful, and lack the fear of God. All African leaders are Okay, I'll continue. This is his feeling. All African leaders are demons except those who have decided to take the bull by his horn and do the right things to survive by discipline and by allowing the laws of their country to work. I got heartbroken when I see and hear the so-called PhD, doctorate, degrees, and master's holders of some so-called deceptive, useless certificates defending foolish decisions by government when it's so clear that they are feeding on the poor citizens to enrich themselves. I rest my anger here. That's coming from someone who clearly is unhappy about a lot of the things that are being proposed. This one says, so don't be surprised about the Matimu tradition because they opposed our independence. They boycotted the 1992 constitution because ordinary citizens were involved. Recently, they opposed the audit of the Electoral register and threatened to go on nationwide strike. Such a savage group of demons are capable of doing anything under the sun, including chewing of ballot papers in parliament. Just one more comment. This one says, every Ghanaian in one way or the other witnessed the wrongdoings in the country. People who matter and meant well for this country talked, but power made them so arrogant and they will not listen. Oral is for the good of this country. I support with all my heart. May the soul of David rest in peace. Margaret again. Mr. Pratt?
Well, it's only 1 week. The government has not taken shape as yet. You understand? And there are huge expectations. I would like to keep my comments for now. There's a lot of time ahead of us, and we'll be able to examine, what this government is up to. There have been a few worrying pronouncements, but I do hope that with time, the government will find a way of dealing with the problem. One of them has to do with the suggesting, and it is the suggesting, that this government may be interested in somehow participating in the building of a national cathedral. It has worried a lot of people. Many people have expressed disquiet about that pronouncement. Of course, the other thing has had to do with the declaration that the privatization of ECG is on the table. And that has also brought a lot of debate and worry and so on. I believe, or I suspect, that this government may be a lot better than the one which has just existed the scene. But it's too early yet. Let's wait and see.
Thank you. Thank you. Then I have time to go through a few more comments.
Not a lot of time.
Yes. 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 I do have about some 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to go through the comments. Sabake James says, my former MP, Nusa Fuseni, I'm expecting you to get an ambassadorial position.
No, I don't want to go.
That's my prayer, inshallah.
No, I don't want to go. I'm farming. I don't want to go outside this country. I've invested more than $2 million in my farm. How do I leave it and go outside this country?
But the person continues to say, that's my prayer. And inshallah, you by all means get it.
No. I reject it here on this table.
That's very interesting. This one says, good morning, Senna. My daughter completed nursing school this year, and for their national service, they had to register 690 Ghana cedis. I want to know if it's normal thing or being implemented this year. Please sign up for me. This is Forrest Osu. I think a lot of things are said about what is happening, but all things will take shape soon because perhaps the vacuum is being exploited by some people. But let me do a few more from the comments that you're sending to us. Some more. This one, I'm enjoying Uncle Pratt and a great panelist. Please, Senate President Mahama cannot fail the sports industry without bringing Edwin Neil Van der Poel as our sports minister, because Neil Van der Poel is incorruptible and hardworking minister in our time. I'm Richard Kwame Jiwonu, CEO of Youth Platform for Africa, and I'll stand with Neil Van der Poel for sports minister. That's from Edwin. This was Mr. Host. President Mahamas I apologize. Mr. President Mohammed's ministerial appointments are praiseworthy and evoke optimism for Ghana's resurgence and revitalization. It is imperative that his appointees live up to the billing and work diligently to improve socio-economic circumstances of the ordinary Ghanaian people who are struggling with hardship and impoverishment. We remain hopeful that these appointments will lead to positive outcomes that benefit the people of Ghana, more especially the teeming youth who are without decent and dignifying jobs. That's by Ernest Everlove Kwashi Dansuman. Thank you for that comment. This one's I've heard something like Dr. Percy, rest in peace. Yes, Doc passed on this morning. Some more comments from us says, please, concerning the energy sector, I want to ask if they are changing the old meters from Reynolds Ablekuma. To be very frank, so you mentioned those meters, and thank you for mentioning. He said what? The one that runs like. But how did Nuru?
I don't know. Nuru, it will run.
Because no, I want to understand how the name Nuru was arrived at.
I don't know. It's on it.
Nuru. Ah, okay. Then I haven't paid attention to it. I tell you, that meter is amazing. Somebody has given you a position. Ambassador plenipotentiary to Cuba. That's the common principle.
Why doesn't it take him?
Who says that one wants to leave this country? This country, you are very good. You want to take you out of this country.
Well, thank you very much for sending in those comments. There are many more comments, but first let me also say a big thank you to the stations that are currently tuning to us. We're grateful to all of you for tuning into us. But before I just acknowledge those stations, let me read this comment. He sent this comment very early. Tafina Mahia says, good morning, SENA. I believe that those that receive tax exemption over hundreds of millions of dollars, if this government decides to make those companies pay their share of taxes, the state will make lots of money. SENA, you remember we were in this country when one person was given tax exemption of over $20 million to build a hotel. Why? So let me now acknowledge those of you who are, okay, the stations that are currently tuning to us. Don't forget that we are live on Radio Gold 90.5 FM. We're also live on China FM in Akachi on 96.9. We're live on Hills FM in Adakula on 91.7. We're live on Newasi Radio Ketekrachi on 89.7 FM. Sela Radio Dabalais on 97.1. Diamond FM Tamale on 93.7. Bewa Radio Yendi on 106.5. Radio Kitawan Sabuba on 95.7, Benya FM Elmina 105.7, Global FM 105.1 in Ho, Zeps FM 95.9 in Zebila, True FM 92.5 in Ade, Solamara FM 89.1 in Tripoli, Boem 88.7 FM in Jessica and Lukusi 96.1 in Vergolokwati, there's Stein FM 90.9, there's Sekpele 104.3 in Likpeto Dome, Akpini Radio in Pando, Denigba Radio 90.9 FM, and OT Radio in Dambai are all tuning to us. So don't forget we're live on Facebook and also live on YouTube, Pan-African Television. A big thank you to Kwame Kwesi Prajin. In fact, when the tussle started over the privatization issue, that was when for a moment I watched my phone to see if, usually this is when he will make a contribution, Dr. Percy, because then he will make a contribution in defense of the issue because he had already expressed an opinion on it. So then maybe he would bring in an angle, a different angle. But anyway, Kwame Kwesi Prajin is General Secretary of Socialist Movement of Ghana. And of course, nice to see Alhaji Husseini, who is Member of Parliament for Tamale Central, Minister for Roads and Highways, Lands and Natural Resources, and also Deputy Minister of Energy in the Mills Administration. And then, of course, thank you to Solomon Owusu, who is a member of the Movement for Change. And sitting right by me is Gabriela Tete, who is Central Regional Communications Officer of the National Democratic Congress. Not happy with the minister she has been given. I am SENA NOMBO. We are back same time next week with another edition of the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. Of course, you are always a big part of the show, and we really do appreciate it. Have a fruitful Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a fruitful week. We'll see you next week. We'll leave you with one of the times when he came on the show, Dr. David Percy. Well, our condolences continue to go out to the family. These are early days yet. We'll keep you informed as to what happens next. But we'll play back one of his appearances on the show to end Alhaji and Alhaji for today.
Elected a despot. When we elected Nana Addo in December 2016, a despot, arbitrary power concentrated in one person, used for purposes that satisfies that person's wishes and desires. And the killing of Ameswale fits in that. The attacks on journalists, the closing down of radio stations, various maneuvers to take charge of what television you can watch, which persons can teach in which universities. All of those things are hallmarks of a despotic regime. And one of the things you do if you have, quote unquote, a system of free and fair elections is to pack, ensure that your persons control the institution that runs the elections, pack it with your activists, and ensure that willy-nilly you are kept in power. When we were talking previously about the register, the point that has been made, and I was making that the president has signaled his intention with the removal of the previous EC, the packing of the EC, the new EC with MPP activists, and it is the president's wish which is driving the intransigence of the EC. Because someone sent me text that the president should advise the EC chair not to be intransigent. He's turning things upside down. It's the president's wish, desire to stay in power no matter what, which is driving the EC in its intransigence, which is pushing them to make statements that are stupid. And I believe I heard the NEC Director of Elections say, or his reporter to have said, that the more the officials of the EC talk, the more foolish they sound. That's true. Because they're trying to conjure reasons to support nonsense. Okay? But we live in a situation where you have, quote unquote, eminent persons who have established reputations in other lives, willing to be used as what I call useful idiots who will likely be involved in this matter. And we know why we know how this matter came up. This gentleman, Mr. Swale, and I believe Anas, what is it?
Tiger Eye,
yes, okay. Had been on investigation targeted at the GFA. But in the course of their work, some matters came up which have since then been attended by a loud silence, where the chair of the GFA spoke about the inner workings of the presidency. How it was possible to influence the president. Okay. And this was a very disturbing matter. In an attempt to, the way he spoke suggested that, people knew about his relationship with the president. The way he spoke suggested that, given his connection, there was very little reason to doubt what he was saying in that video. That our president and his regime are for sale. That was very damaging. We know that for practically all his public life, our president has been constructing an image of someone who is above reproach. What is the favorite phrase that your communicators use?
Incorruptible.
Incorruptible, yes. And here was this video shattering all of that. That was a grievous crime. And if if a crime is committed, you would ask, who stands to benefit? Who would have a reason, a motive to have Ahmed Swale killed? Could list all the persons who got unfavorable coverage in that video. Okay? And then a number of them, DFA members, referees, etc., etc. You could say that the biggest casualty of that video was the chair of the GFA. But you cannot exclude the president. If you are looking for persons who have a motive for wanting for wanting revenge on the persons who have caused such harm, you can't exclude the MP who publicly announced, who directed people at the gentleman in the first place. Because until he spoke about him, I'm sure many people didn't know who he was. Okay. And later he came to confess that he had been urged to go out and do battle to save the name of the president. So if you're going to do an investigation of this matter professionally, and you're drawing up a list of suspects, persons of interest to interview, you cannot exclude the President of the Republic of Ghana. And I'm saying this in the context of recent developments in other places. I'm sure that recently you may have heard about a warrant for the arrest of the First Lady of is it? Lesotho. Is it Lesotho?
Yeah.
Lesotho. Because she suspected in the killing of quote unquote a rival. Okay.